National news has shown a Georgia state lawmaker, young black female, being arrested for having the audacity to do her job, knocking on a door at the state capitol. I'm Rashad Richey, welcome to the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the TV exclusive talking to State Representative Park Cannon and her attorney, Gerald Griggs. Welcome to both of you, thank you for being on the conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Good evening.
Well, let me first start by saying this. Everybody was shocked when they saw what happened while you were knocking on this door, Representative. So what I want to do first, I would like you to give us kind of what was going on in your mind that day at the Capitol when this Senate bill was being signed in secret, Senate Bill 202. Take us to that day.
Senate Bill 202 has been moving through the legislative process for about 2 weeks, but things began to speed up as public pressure ensued. For a period of 17 days, at least, there were protests and uprisings at Liberty Plaza with grannies and their umbrellas, people from the Asian community with community snacks, with Black voting groups who were sharing stories, and with legislators who were standing out in the middle of the rain early in the morning until late in the evening to do a call to action for the state of Georgia about Senate Bill 202. What we knew is that this bill just kept getting more pages added to it that did not actually address the concerns of disenfranchised voters, but instead stroked the egos and increased the conspiracies that are made into law. So on Thursday, make no mistake, legislators in both the House and Senate chambers had their time to dissent and vote against or for Senate Bill 202, but it broke down on party lines, and the debate made it very clear that our narratives around Sunday voting, AKA souls to the polls, and ballot box drop-offs, AKA community voting centers, were not going to be upheld in the law. Instead, they provided statistics to try to say that a raw number of African American voters was a low percentage of voters. But when we took that raw number and we showed what percentage it showed that 37% of African American or Black voters in Georgia used Sunday voting or souls to the polls. So the idea that our truths were in real time being replaced in law by lies, I knew, and many legislators knew, that we could not sit idly by after it passed our chambers and went to the governor's desk for a private signing that completely interrupted and sidestepped the normal bill signing process, which, let me be clear, I have the pins to prove it. Every year that I have been a sitting state lawmaker, I have helped to sign bills into law and been handed those signing pins by this same governor himself. So on that day, all I could think about was increasing the narrative of Senate Bill 202's passage into law.
Here's what I want to do. Let me play the clip from that day, and we'll get more into it. And Attorney Griggs, I'm going to bring you on after this clip.
Yeah, you said you give her one more time, like you're gonna do something. Are you serious?
No, you are not. Represent.
She's not under arrest. What is
For what? Under arrest for what? For trying to see something that our governor is doing?
Why is she under arrest?
Our governor is signing a bill that affects all Georgians, and you're going to arrest an elected representative.
This elected representative is the youngest elected representative in the state of Georgia. Let me go to Attorney Griggs, and I want to be very sensitive to the fact that this is still an ongoing criminal case. She has been charged with 2 serious felonies. Now, there's something in the Georgia Constitution, Attorney Griggs, and I want you to talk about this, that bars arresting a lawmaker during legislative session. Explain that caveat of the Constitution, and did this cop violate this Constitution?
Yes, well, under the Georgia Constitution, elected officials like Representative Cannon are protected from arrest while the legislative session is in session. And so they can only be arrested for limited exceptions. 1 would be treason, 2 would be a breach of the peace, and 3 would be a felony. And as you just saw in that last clip, neither of those categories apply. Representative Cannon was merely knocking on the door with other constituents and a few other members of the House to gain entry to see the signing of the bill. As she said a few minutes ago, she's done this every single year that she's been an elected member of the House of Representatives. So it was normal for her to do this. And she wanted that extra transparency, that millions of voters would get an opportunity to witness what was happening. So she knocked on the door. As you could see, she wasn't trying to interrupt anything other than being present. And it's also clear to see from the picture that was released from the governor's office that there were other members of the House of Representatives that were actually in the meeting. The question that bears to be asked is, why did the governor limit the ability of other members of the House to be present to witness the signing of this bill? This bill is very consequential to the voting rights of millions of Georgians. And that's simply all my client wanted to do, was witness the signing of the bill.
This is quite amazing because basically you have an elected representative. She's at her place of employment, virtually at her place of employment, and she's knocking on a door. She's doing it with respect. She's not kicking the door. She's not trying to open the door. She's literally just knocking on a door. I don't know where knocking on a door constitutes a breach of peace, a felony act, or an act of treason. But I want to read something because this was really interesting, and this was linked to the AJC earlier today. The officer who made this arrest is a lieutenant. His name is G.D. Langford. G.D. Langford produced a 13-page report. Now, everyone who's watching this, you already know cops don't typically write 13 pages of anything. Okay, this is a 13-page report. And in this incident report, he says that he was worried about other protesters being emboldened. And then he says, and I quote, the events of January 6, 2021, this is in the report. The events of January 6, 2021 at the US Capitol were in the back of my mind. This guy literally blamed Trump supporters for arresting a peaceful lawmaker at her place of employment. He goes on to talk about his thoughts and feelings in this report. Reports are supposed to be statements of fact. He veers severely away from that. He says, and I quote, I believed Cannon's actions of obstructing law enforcement in front of agitated protesters to constitute a breach of the peace. She's been charged with 2 felonies. What's problematic about this incident report, Attorney Griggs?
It's a lot of things that are problematic. One is that it does not talk about the other witnesses that were present, the individuals that were live streaming, the fact that all of this is caught on video, and that the fact that there was no imminent breach of the peace. I understand what might have been in his mind, and that's for to be in his mind. But the elements of a crime have to be met, and there are not the elements of any breach of the peace met. They're definitely not the elements of disruption of the General Assembly, because she's clearly a member of the General Assembly. There are clearly other members of the General Assembly who are present at this bill signing. So there are serious issues. And again, Representative Cannon does not have to prove any of this. It's up to the police and the prosecutor to prove every essential element of the crimes charged. So we have serious issues with the mischaracterization of the facts, the lack of the witness support, the lack of video evidence support, all of these allegations. And so we would just humbly submit that there are factual inaccuracies in the report that need to be addressed. And that's why we will address that with the district attorney, or we will address that with a jury. But the issue is clear. There are witnesses, there's live stream footage of every single thing that happened.
Do you know what we do online these days? Everything. You know that. You're watching the show online. You do your banking, credit cards, passwords, all online. So do you need to be safe? Of course! It's not an option. PureVPN helps protect you online, and they actually do it for up to 10 devices, which is great. And they've got deals right now. That's why I like this sponsor. I want you to go check it out. TYT.com/PureVPN. Make sure you protect yourself online. It's really important. TYT.com/PureVPN.
My name is Cassandra Hanks. I've been with TYT for 3 years. I am a video editor and a photographer. A main perk for working for TYT is, as being their main photographer, I get to photograph and sometimes meet some of the celebrities that come through. Susan Sarandon was amazing because she brought her dog Penny. Tom Morello is probably my favorite because I love rock music. Meeting people like Joss Whedon and Quentin Tarantino has been some of the reasons why I got into filmmaking and photography. Was like a dream come true.
All right, well, the Young Turks special election day coverage dropping.
An amazing power panel.
Look at this panel. You want to talk about power?
It's like a smart Destiny's Child.
We're all too strong.
We start a revolution. Yes, another one.
Aren't you excited?
Wow.
And then the best writers in the country are right there on this panel with the obvious exception of John.
In a lot of ways.
Why is he lying? Because these are acts that you can commit with impunity.
Most of us are usually in boxer shorts underneath.
I went with the pants today.
This is the first ever power panel with Donald Trump as president.
We have elected the top Twitter troll in the country.
We have to stop pretending that race is not an issue in this country.
Now keep in mind, racism had gone away until Barack Obama brought it back.
That's right.
They want to protect life so much that they want to ensure that insurance companies don't cover your maternity care.
I've been a fan of TYT, I believe, for the last 6 years.
5 years.
3 years now. 7 years.
4 years now.
2.5 years. I just started because she got me into it.
My boyfriend actually watches it every morning and every night, so I kind of just started watching it with him, and I love it. I mean, it's the only way that I find my news.
Looking through YouTube, looking for political shows that look cool.
I came across a very angry rant from Cenk, and that's when I knew.
So I was immediately in love with the show. And then I haven't missed a live show since then. 10 times a day, I watched the show in the morning. Whenever I had a bad day at high school, Young Turks.
Man, Cenk is just so blunt and honest, and I love the honesty, and there's no BS behind the news, and they just tell everything like it is.
There's nobody censoring them. There's nobody there to say you can't do this, you can't say that. That feel of authenticity makes it seem like what they're saying is true.
I feel like I get the real story from the Young Turks.
I am TYT.
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 Breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. This is Brett Ehrlich with breaking news with Brett Ehrlich. Bernie Sanders wants to break Wall Street, and he wants to break it real bad.
Our system is inherently rigged against the will of the people.
They have 50% of the vote.
And in a democracy, they should have 50% of the seats.
But if you live in an insanely gerrymandered district, your vote functionally doesn't matter.
We drew the map in a way that even though we get 50% of the vote, we're gonna get 13 out of the 18 seats.
You don't actually have the ability to translate the will of the voters in your area into actual government policy.
They should not be allowed to gerrymander these districts. We should actually have a democracy.
Attorney Griggs, can you explain the exact nature of these two felonies? What are they and what kind of time she would be facing if convicted?
Yes, well, she's facing one charge of disrupting the General Assembly, and she's also charged with felony obstruction. One is a 1 to 5 year prison sentence on the felony obstruction, and the disruption of the General Assembly is 1 to 3. So she faces a total of potentially 8 years in prison. And that's why it's so important that your viewers and everyone else understand that simply knocking on a door should not result in lengthy prison sentences. What should actually happen here is the protection of our democracy, the increasing of our voting rights, which is exactly what Representative Cannon was trying to do. She's trying to have transparency in the process to make sure people saw what was actually happening. And she also wanted to protect our voting rights. She stood in the shoes of so many great freedom fighters of the past that were simply fighting to make sure we protected our voting rights. It's curious and interesting to think, not more than 14 or 15 feet away from that very spot, our late Representative John Lewis lied in state in the rotunda, and he always gave us the charge to make sure that we get in the way. Make sure that we get in some good trouble. You call out something that's wrong. And that's exactly what Representative Cannon did in this instance. And that's why it's important that we stand with her, that we defend her, and that we make sure that we protect our voting rights here in Georgia.
Representative Cannon, you have a lot of support, not only in the state of Georgia, but across the country and outside of the country. But you were placed under arrest. You then had to go into an elevator privately with these officers. They stuffed you inside of a police car. You had to take a mugshot. You had to go to jail. I want to know, what were your feelings going through that process, knowing that you had done nothing unlawful whatsoever?
What happened to me was definitely unlawful. The behavior of the officers is nothing short of nefarious, but it pales in comparison significantly when you look at the governor taking an opportunity for privacy while taking away the rights of Georgians to vote. And at least 2.5 million Black Georgians were on my mind at the time that I was detained. A law created to suppress the voting power of Black people. We must not lose sight of this issue. And we must not stop in the fight. As we just recalled, because I was just a few feet from where our late Congressman John Lewis lied in state, had walked with me and talked with me about his experiences. We must turn up for voting rights. We have to increase our ability to articulate and to be clear that right now, remedy looks like federal, meaning congressional, acts that keep our voting rights intact.
Let me highlight something quite ironic. The governor of Georgia literally said multiple times that no voter fraud took place in the state of Georgia. The chief elections officer, the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, said in a recorded conversation there was no voter fraud in the state of Georgia. However, they have literally legislated as if there was voter fraud in the state of Georgia. They are legislating on lies. Some of the elements of this bill, such as restricting early voting, restricting what counties can do to accommodate their population for voting, making sure that the Republican-led legislature can actually take over any county in Georgia, any board of elections, anytime they choose. Let's unpack what's in Senate Bill 202. Also, making it a crime, an actual criminal offense, to give someone water or a snack while they're waiting in lines in a state that has a history of long lines in non-white precincts. Let's unpack some of this bill. And Park Cannon, I'll go to you for that. What's in this bill?
As the secretary of the Georgia House Democratic Caucus, I have taken it very seriously to not only read every version of Senate Bill 202, but to disseminate talking points and helpful information so that our members can communicate that to their counties and to their communities. Over the past 2 weeks, we saw the process speed up right in front of our eyes and then behind closed doors. There would be a hearing that would happen, and all of a sudden there would be new amendments. But when we voted on the bill on the floor, yet and still the bill was not online for public view.
Wow.
Only version of the bill that remained online through the House's deliberation was a 2-page bill. But as many of us know, when it passed the House, and yes, it was amended on the floor of the House to actually address issues related to what happens if a county doesn't have a website. What will they do to get that information out? That bill was then 98.5 pages long. You're telling us that 96.5 pages worth of legislation that do 3 things majorly with no fiscal note. 1, call for a state takeover by elected officials of those who have been appointed by their local communities, meaning that they can actually empower the Secretary of State to remove an entire group of election officials and replace it with one appointee. 2, it limits Sunday voting as we know it, souls to the polls, in the versions of taking away how many times a county can choose to use Sunday voting, but also saying you gotta choose between Saturday and Sunday. So if you choose to do Saturday voting, you're unable to do Sunday voting. I quickly want to unpack why it is so important that we protect the right to vote right up until election day. The scenario is this: you work all week until Friday, and you've been busy with your kids and your family and your commitments. You hear on the radio, election day is on Tuesday, make sure you get your vote in. If you don't have Saturday voting, if you don't have Sunday voting, the next day that you can vote is Tuesday, but you're back at work, so you are unable to cast your ballot. The third thing that this bill does is it takes away ballot drop boxes, which have been so incredibly helpful during our global pandemic. There are federal guidelines that were released after the September 11th attack on the United States that outlined how to provide elections in stages of emergency or pandemic. And we were following these new guidelines to say we can do different ways of ballot collection as long as there is a camera and that is in a secure location. So Senate Bill 202 should never have been signed into law without a fiscal note because of those 3 impacts on Georgia voters.
I spoke to a commissioner earlier today in another county outside of Fulton County, and he made the very same proclamation that you're making. He said, we're going to have to pay for this law, and we have no idea how much we're going to pay because there is no fiscal note whatsoever. Let me read something that you tweeted, Representative, after you were released on bond. Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock was there supporting you and many others. And you tweeted, and I quote, "We will not live in fear. We will not be controlled. We have a right to our future and the right to our freedom. We have 1 minute left. I want you to tell those who are watching this, what do you think they should do to secure democracy? Because what happens in Georgia is just a microcosm of what's happening across the country.
To secure our democracy, continue to raise your voice and to raise your opinions about the voting legislation that is being passed across America, because the federal government will need to address it with one opportunity, which is known as the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We are so thrilled that so many families and communities are standing with us here in Georgia. And we say to you, keep knocking, America.
Very well said. Representative Park Cannon, Attorney Gerald Griggs, I appreciate you both for blazing the trail, being progressive, and being thoughtful about democracy. Thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you for having us.
What's up, happy people? You're watching The Young Turks with Anna Kasparian. And since it's Wednesday, my co-host is John Iadarola for the first hour, host of The Damage Report, good friend of mine. And, the father of all dragons. That's who John Iadarola is. How you doing,
majority.
John?
I'm good.
I'm
good. A lot of kids. It's an obligation, but also an honor. But no, I'm excited. I'm always excited to do the news on Wednesday, and I'm also, and I mean this in only the most good way or neutral way, not in a bad way. It feels like it's always Wednesday. Like I feel like we just did this, didn't we? I love it.
Well,
but I feel like I just did.
We did for your
Roughly
show.
A week ago. Oh, that's true.
Well,
yeah,
that's
also
true as well. Yeah, so everyone go check out The Damage Report, which I co-hosted with John yesterday. And Brett Ehrlich, who produces this show, also hosted today. So The Damage Report, one of the fan faves over at TYT Network. So make sure you check it out. And also follow John and The Damage Report over at TikTok, where I guess you're putting out TikTok videos now, which is cool. Very hip.
That's a good guess.
Very edgy.
You nailed it, honestly. That's what we're doing.
Oh my goodness. All right, well, we have a lot of news to get to today, including some more concrete details regarding Joe Biden's infrastructure proposal. We have a better understanding of where his priorities are on that piece of legislation. In hour 2, Nando Vila will be joining me, and we'll probably talk about all sorts of lefty stuff, including what should be done when it comes to student loan debt, if we get to that, if we don't get to that in the first hour. We'll also talk about the aftermath of the coup in Bolivia. Luckily, they were able to overpower those forces and actually have a democratic election. But the United States is pushing forward with some talking points that I think could be problematic. So let's squash them in the process. But before we get to all of that, John, why don't we touch on what we're learning about migrant facilities and detention centers at the border? You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. We're learning more about migrant detention centers that the Biden administration is keeping unaccompanied minors in. Now, previously, the Biden administration refused to be transparent and did not allow the media to tour these facilities. But now the Associated Press and CBS News were both able to tour the main detention facility for unaccompanied migrant children in the border, and it's the facility in Donna, Texas specifically. So we're gonna show you some video in just a second, but I think that giving you a little more context into what the reporters experienced is important, because unfortunately the situation is just as bad as we had suspected. For instance, more than 4,000 people, including children and families, were crammed into a space intended for 250, and the youngest were kept in a large playpen with mats on the floor for sleeping. The children were also being housed by the hundreds in 8 so-called pods formed by plastic dividers, each about 3,200 square feet in size, and many of those pods had more than 500 children in them. So there's no question that this detention center is jam-packed with people. The conditions are very similar to what we saw during the Trump administration, and we do have a quick CBS News report to get to show you what that scene looked like.
Inside this processing facility run by Border Patrol, plastic pods have become an overcrowded purgatory for migrants waiting to seek asylum.
HHS does not have the adequate beds to be able to take on all of these kids.
There are roughly 4,100 people here, 17 times what the facility was built to hold. More than half are unaccompanied children. They all sleep on the floor, some with mats and others with foil blankets. Jacqueline Perez crossed the river this morning with her 2-month-old baby despite the dangers. We do it out of necessity, otherwise we wouldn't come here, she says. She left Guatemala to find a job in the United States and will likely end up at the Donna facility. This is where the smallest children stay. Somehow they crossed into the US alone, now awaiting their fate in a tiny space never meant for children.
So, Jean, there's no question that this is a difficult situation. Biden has committed to avoiding the deportation of unaccompanied minors, mostly because the federal courts demand that he commit to that. The tail end of the Trump administration had a federal court ruling indicating that he couldn't just use deportation of unaccompanied minors as the default strategy. So he had no choice but to allow them into these facilities for processing as well. But these children are only supposed to be in the detention facilities for 72 hours max. And unfortunately, they're spending a lot more time there because there's a backlog, there aren't enough resources committed to actually dealing with this situation appropriately. And really, there is no difference in the way that these migrant children are being treated right now versus how they were treated toward the end of Trump's administration. This is different, let me be clear. This is different from taking children away from their parents at the border. That was Trump's zero tolerance policy. In this case, you have an influx of unaccompanied minors coming to the border, and Biden is bringing them in because he has to. But the way it's kind of being reported makes it seem like there's a significant difference effectively in the way that these migrant children are being processed. And that's just not true. That's not the case.
Yeah, there's arguably in some of the photos less chain link. That's about it. That's pretty much it. It doesn't really seem like much of a difference. You still end up with a bunch of people sleeping on the ground. By the way, maybe we don't need to remind people of this. It's still a pandemic. You cannot cram people together like that if we were in a totally cool public health situation. We are very much not, though. And so it's dangerous for a ton of different reasons. That is one of the big ones. We can go through all the things that we always say when we talk about this, about how Biden, theoretically has better motives and blah, blah, no Stephen Miller, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, there's still a ton of people there. It didn't happen like a week ago. We've been talking about this for weeks now. I think we can expect better than the Mats. I think we can. I think that if we can, our military has a missile with blades that spring out so they can hit a car and kill people in the car without an explosion, just from the actual blades. It's that accurate. We can't figure out how to purchase beds. There's no mattresses nearby. There's no Walmart or anything like that. We only have a defense budget of like $700 or $800 billion. So clearly it would take months and months to figure out how to get people off the ground, or to how to make some extra space, or how to, we're not traveling. Rent out hotels, rent out motels. You could do all of this. And maybe you can't do it in one day, but I do not think it is unreasonable to expect that in a month, 2 months, you can't figure that out. It just seems completely unacceptable. Motivation's better, whatever. That buys you a couple of days, I guess, to figure it out. And now we get to expect that we don't end up with a situation that is indistinguishable from under Trump. And one really last final point, people should be way more pissed off at the press secretary right now, because the press secretary swore a couple weeks ago, oh, we'd love to let you people in. We just have to figure out the security for their privacy or whatever. Nope, it's because it looked like that. That's why they didn't want the cameras in there. There's no different security thing. You can still see them in the video now, except what you see is really bad and inconvenient to them. So I really hope that Biden and the press secretary get some hard questions about their previous delaying tactics.
I mean, look, to be, I guess, fair to reporters, that was really the only thing that reporters had any interest in asking Biden about during his first press conference, his first presidential press conference. I didn't really enjoy the framing coming from the reporters, because it seemed like they were trying to get Biden to commit to just deporting unaccompanied minors. Which they should have probably done a little bit of homework to see how the federal courts have ruled on that very issue. But nonetheless, putting that aside, I think you're right. I mean, there are these short-term solutions in providing the resources necessary to handle this situation at the border appropriately. But then there's also, a long-term solution as well that so far I don't see a lot of journalists drawing connections to. I see some independent journalists drawing connections to, and Biden is on the wrong course when it comes to it, and that's foreign policy, right? So he's continuing on with the same type of rhetoric that we heard from Trump in regard to Venezuela. The United States goes in there and succeeds in implementing some sort of coup. I mean, they certainly tried several times under the Trump administration, and they just just install whatever US puppet they want. What is that gonna do to further destabilize the situation in Venezuela? And then you have US citizens who are like, why do we have this influx of migrants coming to the border? As if we played no role, as if the United States played no role. That video that we showed you, in the end of it, I made sure to include the woman from Guatemala. I mean, obviously, the United States led a coup in Guatemala as well, which led to a lot of economic pain and crime in that country. So these are things that we need to look at. It's not a quick fix. It is a difficult situation. There's no question, right? But there needs to be a holistic approach as opposed to, send them all back, or that's really all I'm hearing in terms of solutions, and that's not really a solution. I think that the US needs to take responsibility for its role in causing what we're experiencing at the border right now.
Yeah.
But just to give you a few more details before we move on, the youngest children, among them a 3-year-old girl being cared for by her 11-year-old brother and a newborn with a 17-year-old mother, are kept out of the pods and they sleep in that playpen area. The Border Patrol generally is not supposed to detain children for more than 3 days, but Health and Human Services lacks the space. So more than 2,000 kids have been at this particular facility, the Donna facility, for more than 72 hours, including 39 for more than 15 days. And then I do want to call out the Associated Press because it does show that they haven't done their homework about why Biden has committed to accepting unaccompanied minors. They say that Biden has declined to resume the Trump era practice of expelling unaccompanied immigrant children. No, but that's not true, right? Trump did want to expel unaccompanied migrant children, but the federal courts told him he couldn't do that. He was citing coronavirus as the reason for deporting literally anyone who came to the border, including children. And when a judge ruled that he couldn't do that with unaccompanied minors, he stopped that practice. And so obviously Biden, whether he wants to or not, does not have the ability to deport children. And that framing matters, right? Because what they're trying to do here is draw a distinction. And that distinction, I think, unfairly gives Biden credit that he just doesn't deserve yet. So far, he hasn't really materially done anything different from what we were experiencing toward the end of Trump's administration. And we gotta be honest about that. If you're not honest about it, you can't talk about solutions, and that's an issue. Yep. All right, let's move on to some other news today. Matt Gaetz is big story. So big story, folks, big, not good, bad. All right, so Matt Gaetz appeared on the Tucker Carlson show to attempt to defend himself, although you wouldn't think that's the case based on how this conversation went down. So just to give you a little background on what he's defending himself on Tuesday, news broke that the Department of Justice was investigating whether Gaetz had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old and paid for her to travel with him, which by the way breaks federal sex trafficking laws. 3 sources briefed on the probe told the New York Times. Gaetz, in an Axios story later that day, denied the allegations, but confirmed that he was under investigation. Gaetz says that the accusations were part of an extortion effort. And he also alleged that he and his father are cooperating with the FBI and that his father is wearing a wire. Because when someone's wearing a wire, you would want to make a public announcement about it. But with that said, how did the conversation with Tucker Carlson go? Let's take a look.
The New York Times is running a story that I have traveled with a 17-year-old woman, and that is verifiably false. People can look at my travel records and see that that is not the case. What is happening is an extortion of me and my family involving a former Department of Justice official. And the FBI and the Department of Justice were so concerned about this attempted extortion of a member of Congress that they asked my dad to wear a wire, which he did with the former Department of Justice official. Tonight, I am demanding that the Department of Justice and the FBI release the audio recordings that were made under their supervision and at their direction, which will prove my innocence.
What is the allegation? That's really not very clear from these news stories.
Yeah, again, I only know what I've read in the New York Times. I can say that actually you and I went to dinner about 2 years ago. Your wife was there and I brought a friend of mine, you'll remember her. And she was actually threatened by the FBI, told that if she wouldn't cop to the fact that somehow I was involved in some pay-for-play scheme, that she could face trouble. And so I do believe that there are people at the Department of Justice who are trying to smear me.
So there's a lot to unpack there, John. Yep. I'm gonna let you take a stab at it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's what Tucker was thinking. There's just so much here, and I wish there was less. Yes, so he's had a very interesting defense strategy over the past day. He said there, the idea that I traveled with a 17-year-old is verifiably false. The travel, look, is an important component when it comes to the actual sex trafficking laws, because that's the illegal part, is crossing state lines and having money be involved. He didn't deny having sex with a 17-year-old there, which I feel like I would do if it weren't true. I would want to make clear that people knew that I was not, as a late 30s congressman, sleeping with a 17-year-old girl. I would want that. That would be nice. Also, he says the travel allegations are verifiably false. People can check my travel records. Okay, I mean, if it's in there, that might prove that it happened. It not being in your official travel records doesn't prove that it didn't happen. But anyway, this will be
John, hold on. I mean, I think that was actually a valid point, because I too keep logs of who I'm fornicating with when I'm traveling, obviously.
I've read
what kind
those
of
notes.
Travel arrangements I've, like, what a stupid thing to say, right? Like, oh, I'm potentially breaking sex trafficking laws with what I'm doing. Let me make sure that there's proper documentation of that. Anyway, but continue, sorry.
Yeah, and like sometimes I'll be in a store and I'll think, I really want to shoplift. Let me add it to my to-do list. No, that's not how crimes work. Also, making it about somebody attempting to extort you, I get that. Whether it's true that it's happening or not, I get it. And I'll even go so far as to say, I assume that it is true that someone is trying to extort him. I think a lot of people are missing that doesn't mean the crime didn't happen. It actually kind of indicates that it's more likely that the crime did, because you can try to extort someone for something they haven't done. Especially with being a Republican congressman, though, they're unlikely to go down for crimes they did commit, let alone ones they didn't. I would rather extort someone for a crime they committed. So I get him wanting to make this whole conversation about this DOJ guy that's like messing with his family, but the DOJ guy could be messing with his family because Matt Gaetz had sex with a 17-year-old and was bringing her across state lines. So all of that is really important. We also, whether it's a crime or not, we'll see. Whether he did anything or not, we'll see. But even like, I think we have to make clear whether he is going around trying to begin relationships with 17-year-olds, because whether that's legal or illegal, I think it's noteworthy for a public servant.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with you on that. Well, look, obviously we don't know without a shadow of a doubt that he did what's being alleged or what he's being investigated for. So our commentary, just to be clear, is really speculative at this point. But I think it's easy to make educated guesses based on the character of the people that we're talking about. And Matt Gaetz is the type of person who can lie to the American people with a straight face. He certainly did it incessantly during the Trump administration. He did it incessantly when it came to the 2020 general election. So it's really hard to take anything that he says seriously or at face value, considering how willingly deceptive he's been in his short tenure in Congress. So we'll see what happens through the outcome of this investigation. But as he was talking in that interview, I couldn't help but think about similar types of claims that were made by Trump's lawyers in response to the outcome of the 2020 election. There was a lot of like, oh, I demand that this gets released and that gets released, and we have all this evidence. Wait till you see all the evidence. The evidence is gonna come out and you'll see. And of course, there was no evidence. And so like, it might be different in this case with Matt Gaetz, but if I had to share my opinion, he's not a trustworthy person. With that said, though, I love that he's like trying to like relate with Tucker Carlson in this next clip.
I'm not the only person on screen right now who's been falsely accused of a terrible sex act. You were accused of something that you did not do, and so you know what this feels like. You know the pain it can bring to your family, and you know how it just puts people on defense when you're accused of something so salacious and awful.
You just referred to a mentally ill viewer who accused me of a sex crime 20 years ago. And of course, it was not true. I never met the person. But I do agree with you that being accused falsely is one of the worst things that can happen.
Oh man, just in case, I want to remind people, as I did on the damage report this morning, that might or might not be what Matt Gaetz was referring to. But Tucker Carlson was also accused of sexual harassment by a frequent Fox News guest last year, not 20 years ago, and it was a woman he very much met. Whether it happened or not, we can't say. But there are far more recent accusations against him than the thing he's referring to.
What was also fascinating was the post-interview commentary from Tucker Carlson. Let's hear what he had to say.
You just saw our Matt Gaetz interview. That was one of the weirdest interviews I've ever conducted. That story just appeared in the news a couple of hours ago. And on the certainty that there's always more than you read in the newspaper, we immediately called Matt Gaetz and asked him to come on and tell us more, which, as you saw, he did. I don't think that clarified much. But it certainly showed this is a deeply interesting story, and we'll be following it. Don't quite understand it, but we'll bring you more when we find out.
I mean, that's a strong claim to make for a man who's had Rudy Giuliani on his program on multiple occasions. But I get it. I mean, if someone brought up uncomfortable accusations that were, made against me, I would not like that interview and probably respond to it in a similar way. But what I think is interesting about the story is how there is a divide among conservatives on how they're handling this, right? Because, and you'll see in a story that we're gonna do a little later from former White House staffers, there are conservatives who deeply dislike Matt Gaetz and are not defending him. But then there are some conservative lawmakers who should probably, just out of their own self-interest, avoid commenting on the story altogether. And the person that I'm referring to here is Jim Jordan, Representative Jim Jordan, who told CNN, quote, "I believe Matt Gaetz." How about you sit this one out, Jim Jordan? Because you've been accused of hiding or brushing under the rug the sexual assault of wrestlers who came to you and disclosed what they had dealt with. So, it's crazy how Jim Jordan is still in Congress. He seems untouched by that scandal. Hopefully, we learn more about it. If he is actually guilty of what he's being accused for, suffers the consequences of that. But with that said, I mean, if I were Jim Jordan, I would probably just shut my mouth. But he couldn't help himself.
That'd be great advice. I'd love if you would take you up on that. Yeah, he believes him. Okay, whatever. They believe the guy in all of these cases. That's hardly new. We don't have to make this a big part of this, but one of the most vocal defenders so far has been Marjorie Greene, a person whose entire wackadoodle, to pick up Brett's term, worldview is based on the idea that there is a shadowy cult of powerful political people who are preying on young girls. But when she comes across someone who might fit into that group, no, I believe him, it's a witch hunt. And again, we don't know what he did or when he did it, but she is predisposed to assume that someone she likes and agrees with politically cannot obviously have done that. It's just, somewhere there's somebody, Hillary Clinton, or somebody's raping kids, I don't know who. But yeah, they're of course gonna believe him, or they're at least imply. It's, at the end of the day, it's a sexual harassment, sexual assault claim. They don't care about that. They've been very clear and very consistent about that. They can change everyone.
It's literally a sex trafficking claim. It is literally an accusation of sex trafficking of a minor. That is literally what QAnon. Exactly.
But it doesn't matter. They don't care about that. They didn't care about Epstein.
I know.
They don't care about Trump stuff. They don't care about any of the specific ones. And to pretend, just recently with Cuomo's scandal, the hosts were all pretending, oh yes, no, now we take all of this stuff very seriously. Got to believe the women and all of that. And then they go right back to, no, we're just gonna have him on to talk about it. Tucker Carlson, so confused about this story, arguably could have reached out to the journalist who'd written it for some details, or perhaps a contact at the DOJ or something. No, we should only bring on the victim to lose his mind on camera.
Yeah, and to Tucker Carlson, the story is not that complicated. I read it within a 4-minute break on the show yesterday. It's pretty straightforward. You just have to read. You have to read the article. But sometimes that can be really difficult to do, with all the busy schedule stuff that he's got going on. Anyway, with that said, we should take a break. But when we come back, we're not quite finished with this story. We're gonna tackle it from a different angle because apparently there was a lot of disdain for Matt Gaetz within the Trump administration. We'll give you the details on some leaked texts and more when we come back. What's up, everybody? So lots of updates for you all on programming and all that. But before I get to it, just want to encourage you, if you haven't done so already, to join as a member on YouTube. It's one of the best ways to really support our show financially and through moral support. We love hearing from our members. We love collaborating with them. And so just click that join button and you'll notice that there are different options for membership. We're actually in the process of possibly working on more options for you guys with more perks. But there are different price points and you can join depending on what you're most comfortable with. And it's a great way to help support us and keep us independent, which is really, really important. And as you know, YouTube is demonetizing quite a bit of content. So this is a great way to keep us focused on the stories that we want to share with you all without being influenced at all by opaque algorithms. With that said, though, let's move on to some good news. We were nominated for a Shorty Award and we can still vote today. I believe today's the last day of voting. I thought it was yesterday, but no, it's today. So go to tyt.com/shorties. We're trying to win an award for TYT's election coverage. And the category is Best in Live Event Coverage. And come on, guys. Did anyone do it better? Okay. So definitely check it out. And you can vote up until midnight tonight. So check that out. Also, Happy Half Hour airs tonight after the postgame show. Make sure you check that out on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/TYT. And of course, that's hosted by Brett Ehrlich. Brett, do you want to jump in and tell us what's going to be on your show today real quick? Just a quick tease.
Yeah, it's gonna be so fun. It's I think it's on the Twitch homepage today. I'm just lost in this guy's eyes, honestly. I can't even really remember what I'm supposed to do today, but it'll be fun. Good news and good booze.
I love it. I love it. Okay, real quick, I'm gonna read a few member comments before we got to get back to the show, starting with Salam, who says, America, we have had two ways so far that attempts to change the trajectory of politics. One, you can form a union as the folks in Alabama are trying to do, or you can storm the Capitol as another group attempted. Guess what way will last longer? Yeah. I got stoned and watched a bunch of documentaries last night about the 1930s, and I agree with you. Anyway, we'll talk about that in the post game. I have a lot to say. Anyway, Old Mike writes in and says, could Biden administration possibly get big pillows from the pillow guy, Mike Lindell? Would it be any different if these children from, I don't know, Sweden, or if they were from Sweden or Germany? Yeah, I mean, I don't really see many German children there. But look, the point is, Germany doesn't have a history of the United States in installing its own puppets there. You get what I'm saying? Like, there's a difference between how the United States has responded to leftist leaders in Latin America and nationalizing industries in Latin America versus how they've handled European countries. It's very, very different. And again, foreign policy is very much intertwined in the immigration issue. It's just that reporters would have you think otherwise. We got to get back to the show. See you there. Welcome back to TYT. I am gonna pull a Cenk Uygur and read one more member comment right now, and it's from you. I'm honest. You caught my attention with your handle. Your mom is in recovery mode. Writes in and says, "Can we all take a second to appreciate that calling a 17-year-old girl a 17-year-old woman is a massive red flag for how creepy he is?" I would agree with you, although even I make that mistake, and it's just like. Honestly, when I do it, I misspeak, right? Like it's hard to like really process the fact that this is a minor that we're talking about. But he's creepy, like there's no question about it. I just think that maybe that's not the best reason to point out how creepy he really is. Speaking of creepy, we're not the only ones who have issues with Matt Gaetz. Apparently, there were some former Trump aides and GOP officials who also didn't like him, and we know about this through leaked text. So. As so-called Gaetzgate started trending on Twitter, former Trump aides and GOP officials started basically dunking on Matt Gaetz in a private group text. And this group text was obtained by Business Insider. And so, of course, we're gonna read you what some of those texts had to say. Now, one former Trump aide who was on the text chain with 18 current and former GOP and White House sources shared this with Business Insider, and here's what they were saying. The former Trump aides aren't necessarily happy to see the 3-term lawmaker in trouble, but they feel a little vindicated, a former White House staffer told Insider. Oh, they feel vindicated. What is that about? Well, for instance, one former White House staffer said this: "He's the meanest person in politics." Now, remember, we're not talking about leftists. We're not talking about progressives. We're not even talking about Democrat, like liberal Democrats. We're talking about conservatives, people who worked in the Trump White House, the very same administration that Matt Gaetz like could not stop himself from defending. He loved Trump, was certainly a Trump bootlicker and loyalist. But apparently there were people within the White House that were not fans of Matt Gaetz. Republican leadership, one former congressional aide wrote, "will likely watch him completely implode in a matter of days without having to do a thing." So I have more to share with you, John, but I wanted to get some of your thoughts first.
Yeah, the prediction that he could implode within a couple of days is an interesting one. I wonder how much we could possibly learn during that time if the investigation is ongoing. Maybe if the investigation has been concluded, then someone from the DOJ might come out and make that clear. Maybe he can do a bunch more media hits that'll make him look really bad. That's certainly possible. In terms of him being the meanest person in politics, as you point out, people who work in the Trump White House said that. They work for Trump, and they think Matt Gaetz is the meanest guy in politics. I don't know. Look, I think that there are a lot of negative qualities that sort of just scream from every word and action that he engages in. Mean isn't the one that I find to be most important or most worrying.
Right.
There's some of the other allegations about him in terms of like why he's in politics, what actually he wants, what he does, his obligation to his constituents to do work. That sort of stuff I feel is more important potentially.
Well, okay, real quick, with the statement coming from that congressional aide about Matt Gaetz imploding, I don't know how true that is, but the way that I read it was, oh, these are people who are looking for Matt Gaetz to implode, right? Sure. And I think that that's fascinating, and I wish we knew why. I wish we knew more details. The accusation of meanness, I agree with you. It's not the worst accusation, especially when you consider the Trump administration. However, I want to know why. I wish we had more context into why it is that they seem to have so much disdain for him. One former Trump White House aide also wrote, "Good riddance. It sounds like he let whatever BS power he thought he had go to his head, and he thought himself above the law."
But yeah, I mean, he's the first politician to do that.
Yeah, I know. Look, there's definitely a lack of self-awareness here, right? Especially when you've worked for the Trump White House. And Trump certainly believed that he was above the law. He was treated as if he was above the law until the very end when, There were some issues with what he was encouraging people to do. There's also some, fraud issues related to his taxes. We'll see if that actually plays out with robust consequences in the end. But yeah, there are plenty of politicians, especially on the right, who seem to think that they're above the law. So there's something else at play, and that's what I'm really curious about.
I would love to know. I really wish that I could sit down very briefly and then never speak to these people again. What their issue with him is. Like he seems, obviously I despise him. Seems awful. He's a total tool. But from their point of view, isn't Matt Gaetz like what this whole thing is about? Like, don't they just want an army of plastic-faced Matt Gaetz that just go on Fox News to own the libs? They don't do anything. They're fine with whatever, proto-authoritarian takes over, doing whatever they want to the government, to our democracy. Like, I really, is the issue just a personal thing? Is it a comment that he made? Do they actually wish that he was doing more work? I would find that to be a positive thing. Yeah, I really wish that I wish there was more substance to the critiques than just, yeah, that guy sucks. I hope he, goes to jail over this.
So let's put out some theories. And my main theory is that despite the fact that it looks as though there's like this united front in pushing the Republican Party toward Trumpism, I think that internally, behind closed doors, the old guard absolutely hates that, right? I think that, these staffers, these former White House aides, these are people who didn't want the Republican Party to pivot over to this pretty disgusting brand of Trumpism. And Matt Gaetz is really a big symbol of that type of culture within the GOP. So I think that they can't publicly say this stuff, right? Because this is what the base is. This is what the base loves, and they can't speak out against it. That's honestly career suicide for them. But I think that internally, the way that they really feel is that this new, I hesitate to say new, but this Trumpish culture that has really overpowered the Republican Party is uncomfortable for them. They don't necessarily agree with it, and it could come with consequences for the GOP eventually. Actually, it did. I mean, with the Republicans no longer in power. So maybe that's what's really fueling it. But there could also be some personal issue as well. Who knows?
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah. All right. You know what? Let's take a break. And when we come back, we've got a giant story to share with you about the details in Biden's infrastructure proposal. We had shared some preliminary details with you all last week, but now we have more concrete figures on just how much the Biden administration plans on spending and where they plan on spending it. We'll get that story in for you and more when we come back. Come right back. Dragon writes in our super chat section and asks a very important question, which maybe I need to lay off the weed because I know this reference, but I don't remember exactly where it's from. Have you ever put butter on a Pop-Tart It's so freaking good. John, where's that from? Is that from Family Guy?
You don't remember? Yes, it's Family Guy.
Yes,
you were obsessed with that song for a while.
I know. That was very 2012. I remember that was like something in my head all the time. And I would ask you all the time because you're the king of Pop-Tarts. Like no one loves Pop-Tarts more than John Iadarola. Like every Pop-Tart,
their CEO
every flavor.
Come close, yeah.
No, I agree. Anthony Patrick says, oh, thank you, Anthony. This is super sweet. And okay, Anna's my favorite. So he's ranking hosts. I'm just gonna fast forward to the last part because he says that he started watching for Cenk but stayed for my brain. It's really funny because people did not stay for my brain in the early days of TYT. And I used to be super intimidated by Cenk, Matt Taibbi. I'm like, I don't think I could ever be as knowledgeable as them. And then I do what I always do. I just crush it, not a big deal. Just kidding. Anyway, thank you, Patrick. That's a really, thank you for that kind comment. TYT Wolfpack Justice Dem writes in and says, I think Majority Report reported that there are plenty of resources. That's fascinating. Okay, BorderCon still run by racists, aren't allocating them properly. Biden needs to clean house. Biden also said that himself. Biden said that there were resources appropriated for the border that the Trump administration refused to use. Well, I got news for you. If that's the case, I mean, those resources are still there, right? So use them. And look, to be fair, that Associated Press piece that I was reading did mention that there was construction taking place while they were there, but that's all they said about it. I don't know if they're expanding the facility to make it, livable for people while they're being processed. But obviously, as we learn more about that, we're going to keep updating you guys. Trisha Briggs writes in and says, John is so right. This border situation is completely unacceptable. The Biden administration needs to stop sitting on their hands and do something. Completely agree with you. Now, let's get back to the show. Welcome back to TYT, everyone. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola with you. John, what were you guys talking about on the damage report today? Great time to do a quick plug.
I had Brett Ehrlich, and Wednesdays are big news Wednesdays on the damage report. We had to delve into a really big story, that Matt Gaetz story, and all of the different insanity, both that he's facing, that he's brought in himself, all the context of the weird things he's said and done, his vote against the human trafficking law. He was literally the only person in Congress to vote against it. There was a lot of that, but also the infrastructure bill and a few other things too. A mask burning party, that sounds like fun. All of that will be uploaded today to our YouTube channel.
Yes, the culture wars rage on. But for now, let's talk a little bit more about the infrastructure bill because the Biden administration has released some more details about it and we have a better grasp on where his priorities are. So earlier, we had shared some preliminary details about the Biden administration's proposal to beef up the United States infrastructure. This is an effort to modernize the US infrastructure, focus on converting things over to renewable energies. And this is also coupled with the fact that there should be the creation of millions of jobs. Yes, they're construction jobs. Yes, they're short-term jobs, but you're likely to see this being framed, if not by the Biden administration, by reporters as this New Deal type effort to kind of get the US economy back on track for ordinary Americans. We know the economy is doing real well for people at the very top, even during a global pandemic. Now, it comes with a $2 trillion price tag. When we had initially reported this story to you guys, we mentioned that the price tag was $3 trillion. But what it appears is gonna happen is they're gonna come with a infrastructure bill that would be proposing $2 trillion in spending. And then there would be a second bill that would help with things like universal child care, paid family leave. It would make the child tax credits that just passed under the recent relief bill permanent. And that would again have a price tag of about $1 trillion. I don't know if I agree with the strategy of trying to pass two separate bills. I think that might have some political capital issues with it, but we'll talk about that later. For now, let's focus on what the infrastructure bill includes. It would rebuild 20,000 miles of roads, which I don't know if you've been driving around in the United States recently, but we can certainly use that. It would repair 10 of the most economically important bridges, but that's not where it stops. They plan on repairing other bridges as well, but there is a focus on some of the more economically advantageous bridges. They would eliminate, and this is very important, lead pipes and service lines from the nation's water supply, which is clearly an important objective to have when you consider how dangerous lead is, especially to children as they're developing. They would shift over to clean energy sources, modernize the electric grid, possibly with weatherizing equipment, so we don't deal with what Texas recently dealt with as a result of them privatizing and deregulating their independent energy grid there. And in the process of doing all of this, it could potentially create millions of jobs. Now, Biden's administration has named this the quote, American Jobs Plan, echoing the $1.9 trillion pandemic relief bill that Biden signed into law this month, known as the American Rescue Plan. And the spending in the plan would take place over 8 years. We'll get to how Biden proposes to pay for this in just a minute. But so far, what are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, how he plans to pay for it in terms of the timeline, I don't particularly care about, except the fact that I like that it shows a willingness, as you'll get into in terms of the taxes. I think that the political implications for that being a part of the bill, in terms of how it might influence the possibility of getting Republicans on board, is the important part. In terms of what's in it, pretty much everything that's in it that I've seen, I like, and it's shocking that it's taken to this point to get it. The idea that Republicans under like unified Republican control weren't able to get probably some much smaller infrastructure bill passed, like even just pragmatically, being able to campaign on having done that seems like it would have been a great idea, but I guess it's the government doing something for the country and they're sort of viscerally opposed to that. Yeah, the repairing of the roads is great. Every day we drive on roads. I mean, the 405, I cannot believe that someone could fly into a major US city and drive on a highway like that and think, oh, this is what America thinks of itself. And the bridges obviously is a huge safety concern. Some of the electrification of school buses, and we talked on TDR about the establishment of a 500,000 strong EV charging network. That's great, as you pointed out. The lead pipe removal, finally getting that done again. How could that not have been done already? All of this is good. It's just that for all the good you can fit in your $2 trillion bill, arguably you can fit about twice as much in a $4 trillion bill. And when we're talking about this being over the course of 10 years, it doesn't seem irrational. Maybe we're not gonna hit the AOC request of 10 trillion, but Joe Manchin was asking for more than what Biden is currently targeting. And so what we talked about in TDR, and I'm curious in your opinion, is the process of actually getting this passed, reconciling the House and the Senate versions. Do we think that it's likely that they might produce something more like what we'd want?
I think, well, I mean, you're asking one of the most pessimistic hosts on this network. I don't think that a single Republican is going to vote in favor of this legislation. They would have to do this through reconciliation. I think that discussions about policy, especially right now, end up getting, I guess, bogged down with annoying procedural debates, and that's gonna continue being a problem. So they might be able to pass this through reconciliation. I don't know how much of a problem people like Sinema and Manchin plan on being in the Senate. But what I do know is that, there needs to be something done in regard to the filibuster, because this goes beyond the infrastructure bill. It goes beyond, the other bill that Biden's planning on rolling out. If they want to do anything to reform our democracy, which is an incredibly important agenda item, they're not going to be able to do that through reconciliation. They would have to do that through reforming the filibuster, and in the very least, reforming the filibuster. And I don't know if the will to do that is there. I know that Biden has hinted that he's willing to do it, but right now, in terms of actual steps forward with that, we haven't seen anything yet. The one thing that I do want to caution people about is the way that this proposal is being framed. I think this is a good first step, but this certainly is not like a holistic approach to the economic woes that Americans are facing right now. Because when you frame this as, it's like the New Deal, it's just an exaggerated claim to make.
Yeah,
I think that it's influenced by the New Deal. But remember, Franklin Delano Roosevelt not only focused on rebuilding and revolutionizing the infrastructure here in the United States, he reformed the banking industry, and he had no problem with really increasing taxes on the wealthy. In this case, yes, there is a proposal to increase, like for instance, the corporate tax rate, but Biden is not proposing to increase the corporate tax rate to what it was before the Trump administration, which was 35%. He's proposing to go from 21% to 28%. And I mean, it's just, in my opinion, if you're really trying to create a more equitable system in the US, going like halfway between Trump and what the tax rate used to be just doesn't go far enough. Now, I wanted to share this video with you guys real quick. Although it's not really quick. I know it's a longer video, but the Smithsonian puts out these incredible documentaries. They're titled America in Color. And they did a great documentary about the 1930s and the influence of FDR. And there were flaws, don't get me wrong. There were certainly flaws with the New Deal, which we'll talk about in a second. Flaws in which it looks like Biden tried to correct in his proposal pertaining to race. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, take a look at what happened during the New Deal era.
Roosevelt tries everything he can to make good on his campaign promise of work for those who need it. He forms the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, and offers jobs to 250,000 young men. They earn $30 a month, 25 of which is sent back home. They reshape the American landscape with new roads, 800 parks, and 3 billion trees. In 1935, another New Deal project, the Grand Coulee Dam, is the biggest building site in the world, employing 11,000 men. In Washington state, they excavate nearly 63 million tons of earth and rock. A conveyor belt 2 miles long transports the debris. And some 24 million tons of concrete pour into the Columbia Basin to dam the river.
I'm sorry, but the working men of that era, they can get it. I'm just gonna say that real quick.
As soon as I saw that arm, I looked at the preview view and I knew she was gonna respond, and she did. You did not fail, Kasparian.
Apologies. But you can see the influence of the New Deal era in what Biden is proposing here. But it certainly does not go far enough, right? So there's that issue. However, I do want to give Biden credit because the one area where it really has become a stain on FDR's leadership. It was the fact that the New Deal era didn't really consider Black workers. In fact, it kind of left them behind. And so Biden's proposal very much puts racial equality front and center. And I think that's an important part of this as well. There shouldn't be a difference in how white workers are treated versus Black workers. And he wanted to make sure that that was a part of the legislation. So that's positive as well. So John, did you want to say anything else?
Yeah, I think that as a component of it is very important to bear in mind, what the priorities of the federal government and regular people were back then. Almost certainly the worker with the nice arms, probably a hardcore racist. Let's just keep it real. He was almost certainly a hardcore racist, but he probably was. Yeah, so that's good. Okay. And then also
it's the 1930s.
Exactly. Yeah, no, look at him. Come on. Anyway, I love that they focused on that. But also, we know that Biden likes this idea that he's gonna be bolder than Obama and all of that. And that it's the second New Deal. But I'm just doing rough numbers, and I'm not an expert on this, but as a percentage of the GDP, it is based on the different sources I'm looking at least 1/5 the size, possibly 1/40th the size each year than the New Deal. So significant, and that's good. But I don't know, if you're gonna compare it to that, I think you gotta get that number up higher. And if you really want that, then why are you so hesitant to engage with people like AOC and others that think that we should incorporate what is being termed, I'm seeing a lot of talk about this, the human infrastructure element, and that we should prioritize that as much as the physical infrastructure element.
Yeah, that's such a great point, John. And look, one other thing that I would caution the audience about, or pay attention to this, because this is important. It's not just about how much spending you're willing to commit to. It's also about how that spending will be used. And I'm not even talking about the objectives. I'm talking about, is this going to turn into some sort of giveaway to private companies, right? And we've seen that problem in California with the construction of affordable housing. I mean, there was a Los Angeles City Council member who got arrested by the FBI because he was engaging in a pay-to-play scheme where these developers were getting these sweetheart deals, of course, paid for by California's taxpayers to build affordable housing. And what they would do is they would inflate the costs of construction. And of course, we're footing the bill for that. And so I got a little worried when I saw that investors, I was reading some of these financial publications, and they're just these investors are getting real excited about what this means for the stock market. And it's that's not a good sign. So, but look, I don't want to be too harsh. I just think that that's something that we should be paying attention to moving forward. And so far, based on where his priorities are, it seems like he has good intentions. Not big enough. I certainly think that it could be a problem to try to pass multiple big agenda items through multiple bills. I thought that this was all going to be combined into one piece of legislation, but that's not the case. And so we'll see what happens. But I think anyone who thinks working with Republicans is feasible is being incredibly naive. They're going to be a problem, even though Biden has committed to keeping the corporate tax rate low, really lower than what it was before Trump.
Exactly. And that's, at the time that they were debating the Trump tax cuts, that's what we were saying. Someday, some centrist Dem is gonna be like, I raised the taxes, but in the end, from the perspective of 10 years ago, it's still a cut. They still got their cut. It didn't matter which party was in charge in that respect. And in hindsight, I feel a little bit stupid because Brett and I had a bit of a debate this morning about whether you might be able to get some Republicans on board because it's an infrastructure bill. It's gonna put a lot of money and create a lot of jobs in their districts. But it is, at the end of the day, as he points out, going to be funded via tax increases, and there's virtually no Republicans and potentially even some Democrats that you're gonna lose as a result of that. Even if they're not bringing the taxes back up to where they were at pre-Trump, and they're possibly reimposing certain sorts of loopholes and things like that, you're still gonna lose a lot of politicians, no matter how much economic stimulus it gives to their district, especially when the new strategy is vote against it and then just say that you voted for it for the good stuff. That's what they've started doing for the stimulus bill, for the COVID bill. They could just do that for the infrastructure bill as well.
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, Brett's right. I don't know why you were debating with that point. That's actually
that was only like
really good point.
It's mostly me.
No, but I mean, Mitch McConnell has already come out and he's like, we don't really like the tax, no go with the tax cuts, tax increases. So there's no working with them. I mean, even when Obama offered like additional tax cuts to Republicans in the stimulus bill that he had passed, right? They're like, no, we don't want to work with him. Okay, so let's not make that mistake again, okay? And let's please do something about the filibuster. Otherwise, any discussion about the PRO Act, any discussion about the For the People Act, which would reform our democracy, all of that stuff, it means nothing. It means nothing unless Democrats are willing to do what it takes to get rid of this ridiculous, arbitrary process in the Senate. So we'll see where that goes. And for now, we're gonna move on. Just do one more story with you, if you don't mind. Okay,
I don't.
Great, all right, so let's do one more story. Because I know you have some thoughts about this. You covered it on your show and I wanted to have you elaborate a little bit. So, student loan debt continues to be a massive problem in the United States. This is debt that students cannot get rid of even if they file for bankruptcy. And there have been growing calls for the Biden administration to forgive student loan debt. Now, Chuck Schumer is continuing with these efforts to really present himself as this progressive and a man of the people. And so speaking at a press conference recently, the majority leader called on his supporters to pressure Congress, pressure lawmakers to cancel student loans. Let's hear what he had to say.
Folks listening, whether you have the debt, have a friend who has the debt, believe it's the right thing, we're asking you, email, call, write President Joseph Robinette Biden and tell him you want this done. We're trying to get as many people to contact the White House as possible. And frankly, we told this to Joe Biden and he said, go ahead, let it rip. So let's show him what kind of support there is out there for this great plan that Elizabeth, Bob, and I, and many, many others are pushing. Let's get this done.
Oh.
Wow, what a tactician, really. Yeah.
And what a cool individual. Anyway, I don't like the posing at the end. Also, based on the conversation, if that was an accurate reflection of the conversation that Senator Schumer had with Joe Biden, F Joe Biden. He's like, Schumer's like, yeah, no, the American people really want to cut student loan debt. In fact, they're going to start to make it clear to you. And Biden says, yeah, let it rip. What are you talking about? First of all, you can just look at the polls. You already know what the American people think about it. And I would also say, why do we have to do a whole nother campaign? You said you would do it. You knew how much we wanted it. It was one of the things that led young people to support you in the first place. I'm all for people contacting their elected officials. We ask them to do it all the time. I kind of feel like in this case, they shouldn't have to though. I think that Joe Biden knows damn well what people want. And even if he doesn't, Warren and Schumer do. I don't know about Menendez, but those two definitely. Why don't they talk to Joe Biden? Why don't they put some pressure on him? You're the leader of the Senate Dems. You can cause all sorts of problems for Joe Biden and his agenda if that's what you wanted. If you really are prioritizing this, and he's been consistent, he's been talking about it for months now. Maybe he actually does want $50,000 to be canceled. But if so, don't say, I want it, I'm your champion. Now you guys go and actually make it happen. And presumably if it doesn't happen, well, it was on you guys because I told you to go talk to him. No, and it's not on us. We voted, we got him elected, and by the way, got you to be majority leader. Now you do your job and talk to Joe Biden and make it actually happen. And if we can't do 50,000 right off the bat, we know he can do 10,000 in his own addled mind. What he can do with the stroke of a pen is at least 10,000. Do that, and then we can return and talk about the 40,000. How about that? How about a little show of good faith on this topic from Joe Biden? Because as of right now, he has the exact same position as Donald Trump when it comes to canceling student loan debt. At least in terms of this. I understand they've done a couple of billion for special programs, blah, 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 don't tweet me. I'm talking about the actually canceling a significant portion of the $1 trillion+ in student loan debt that we have outstanding.
No, don't. And also to the people who are like, no, but don't you get it? Biden is going to propose this great indentured servitude bill that forces you to work in a specific field. And then maybe in 10 years, if you're lucky and the right administration is in charge, they might cancel your student loan debt, but probably not. No, I don't want to hear about that. I don't care. Like that's not a solution, right? Mm-hmm. The whole point is to give people the economic freedom that comes along with doing away with this ridiculous student loan debt, most of which is being doled out and processed by the federal government. And they charge interest. That is a form of bringing in revenue for the federal government because they charge interest. And I think that's one of the motivating factors for why we haven't really seen an administration willing to discharge student loan debt. But I agree with you. I mean, you said everything that needed to be said. Chuck Schumer, not a great debater, but certainly a great delegator. And I'm busy. I don't have time to do his job. He needs to do his job, okay? He's got a tremendous amount of power as the Senate Majority Leader, okay? The person who served as a Senate Majority Leader not too long ago, Mitch McConnell, apparently understands how to flex his power. It's just unfortunate that right now we don't have much of that with Democratic leadership. So that's where we're at. But great points all around. Thank you, John, and
I'm
everyone.
Glad we did that last story.
Me too. I saw your tweet about it, or at least the Damage Report's tweet about it, and I was like, I do want to talk about this with John, and you delivered. So, and you guys can watch more of John's commentary over at the Damage Report. Make sure you subscribe. And John, have an awesome night. See you soon.
Thank you. You too. Have fun with Nando.
All right. When we come back, Nando will be joining me for hour 2. See you then.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries. Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There is only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he's the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com.
We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Harkson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
That's right, we're back. You're watching The Young Turks. Anna Kasparian and Nando Vila with you. Nando, how are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. I love doing the Wednesday shows with you because it feels like a taste of Saturday.
It's our weekend show for Jacobin, which we do every Saturday morning. So make sure you guys check that out. It's over at youtube.com/JacobinMag. We go live every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And really it's more of an interview and deep dive show. So Nando and I will pick topics. We will pretty much ruin our Friday nights in writing those topics and researching them for you guys. And then we put a show together. And I love doing it. It's just, I love hosting it. I don't necessarily love working on it because it's so time consuming, but it is a really great learning experience as well. So check that out. All right. Well, one of the topics that we should probably talk about on weekends, and we're gonna talk about it now, has to do with robots and automation. And there's like this celebratory tone in the media regarding what Boston Dynamics has recently developed. Let's give you some details on that. Boston Dynamics has developed a new robot that they're calling Stretch. It's meant to automate the movement of goods and packages within warehouses. And this is certainly a little different from what Boston Dynamics has put out before. If you've seen that like robotic dog looking thing, that was, there we go, that's what I'm talking about. It's in the B-roll as we speak. That's also a Boston Dynamics robot. And a lot of these previous robots meant for automation were really out of reach for companies that would literally need to shift things around within their warehouses. They would have to have an infrastructure in place in order to accommodate those robots. That's not the case with Stretch. So the robot is called Stretch and looks relatively dull for a Boston Dynamics creation. It's not modeled after humans or animals and instead aims to be as practical as possible. It has a square mobile base containing a set of wheels, a perception mast with cameras and other sensors, and a huge robotic arm with 7 degrees of freedom, which will essentially take jobs away from people working at these warehouses. And that's really what this story should be about, but that's not what anyone's focusing on. Also, it has a suction pad array on the the end that can grab and move boxes up to 15 pounds in weight. So let's take a quick look at a demo of what this robot looks like and how it works. So Boston Dynamics is alleging that this robot can move or shift up to 800 boxes per hour, comparable to a human. Some speculate that that's not necessarily true. But really, Nando, what I wanted to talk to you about is, in this environment where we do not have organized labor, automation can be pretty devastating. Whereas if you have a situation in which labor has a seat at the table, they're able to negotiate, automation could actually be great. It could free up their time to focus on other more fulfilling aspects of the company. But we're not in that situation, at least not in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, that video was terrifying, by the way. But you're absolutely right. I mean, their technology need not be a destructive force in our lives. It could be an emancipatory force in our lives. For lack of a better way of explaining it, the Star Trek vision of the future is one in which technological advancement frees humanity from the need to do drudgery and awful work, and basically everyone in the world can live lives of comfort and leisure. And then the Star Trek people just do that stuff by choice. They don't need to be out there exploring the universe. They do it just because they want to. But that's not the world we live in. We live under capitalism, and we live under a system of hierarchy and domination. And in that context, what it is technological advancement is just to displace workers from one industry to another, which is always very traumatic and very difficult because it's not as easy for someone to just change their career, change their lives, uproot their physical location often. It is one of the great ironies of our time that under capitalism, we've seen technological advancement, the likes of which human history has never really seen. But we are unfortunately working longer hours than ever. It has not led to the freedom that we really should. It's, if you look at the amount of hours people working in the day, the amount of precarity that people experience in their lives, it's totally unnecessary. It's really totally unnecessary. And it comes down to who owns the machines, who owns the robots, who owns this technology. Do a handful of wealthy people own it? Because if that's the case, they'll just use the technology to enrich themselves and to dominate the rest of us, to keep us beaten down. If we all owned the technology and we all owned the machines, we would use them for our benefit. We would right. not have to work in Amazon fulfillment centers ever again, because we would just live lives of comfort because all our material needs would be taken care of. But that's not the world we live in today. We just have to get there somehow.
Right. No, and that's exactly right. And it's not just about who owns the technology, but who owns the means of production. And so if you have a co-op where decisions are made democratically, well, yeah, this type of technology could be fantastic, right? You could vote on how you use the technology and what your colleagues can spend their time doing. They could spend time innovating, maybe finding solutions to other issues that they've come across with the business model of the company, right? But that's not the case here. We're living in a investor-based economic system, right? Where you have these investors looking for a return on their investment. And one of the ways that they're usually able to secure that return on investment is by cutting costs. And how do they cut costs? Well, they get people fired, laid off. They find ways to pay people less for the work that they're doing. And that's the environment that we're living under. And if you're living under that culture, that system, these robots and this technology is not seen as an upside to you, the worker. It's seen as an upside to the shareholders, the investors who again are just looking to cut costs, increase profits, and get a nice fat return on their investment, really.
Well, Uber is a perfect example of this. Uber is a remarkable company and a very much a test case, I think, in terms of like how insane the system we live in is today. Uber loses like $6 billion a year in net losses. Like, I don't understand how that is even possible. Like, what are they spending all their money on? But despite that fact that Uber loses literally billions of dollars a year in God knows how, investors still pump money into Uber and still see it as a worthy investment, because they understand that at some point Uber will just employ a fleet of self-driving cars that will, take us to and fro. But I mean, obviously that's a very big and risky bet, but they're willing to lose in the short term billions and billions and billions of dollars a year and prop up this company artificially in order to then own that, what you described, that mean of production, which is, the fleet of self-driving cars, which are going to take us to and fro, and then extract profits from there. That's it. That's their game. Uber does not work as a sort of driver model. It just really does not. There's a reason why taxi cabs are more expensive than Uber. It's because that's what you need to make. That's what they cost. Undercutting those prices lead to literally. I think they lost $6 billion last year, and I think they lost something like $7 billion the year before. It's like I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't understand it either, especially when you consider the fact that Uber is not purchasing or leasing a fleet of vehicles for their employees to drive. Employees are driving their own vehicle. Like, you're right. Where does the money go? Uber is effectively just an app. It's just an app, really. Yeah. Like they developed an app.
What's like on the high end of how many like engineers they need to have to oversee the app? Like 200? Like that's all it is. What else do they need? I don't get it. I guess maybe some marketing expenses, blah blah. This is $6 billion a year in losses, like net losses, expenses minus revenues. I don't understand. Like that means that their like expenses every year have to be like in the tens of billions, and I don't understand on what. I really don't. Where they're just like throwing money into a trash can and lighting it on fire. I don't get it.
And they're certainly not paying for benefits for their drivers. No. In fact, they succeeded in their campaign to crush workers in California with the passage of Prop 22. So there's like a whole new classification of workers that aren't even really considered employees. So as a result, Uber doesn't have to provide any benefits to these drivers who are bringing in whatever money they do bring in, and I guess squander irresponsibly to the point where they're losing billions of dollars every year. But the point here is the automation, the technology is not the problem. It's the system under which we're operating that makes it a problem, because the individuals who actually work at these companies, build the wealth for the executives at these companies. They're not the ones who have a say on how these robots will be deployed, how they'll be used, and ultimately what their fate as workers will be. So for anyone who's celebrating this in the media because technology is cool, just understand that there are consequences to it if you're in a situation that we're experiencing here in the United States.
Well, what they're actively.
One other thing.
Yeah.
One quick thing I wanted to say. I am curious to see how I want to differentiate how this plays out in the United States versus some of the, Scandinavian countries, for instance, that have strong labor unions, because I would venture to say that there are going to be potentially different outcomes. And there is a reason why, online security and online privacy tends to be taken a little more seriously in European countries versus the United States. But with that said, what were you going to say, Nando?
Well, no, just that that the like with the media that you were talking about, like how they're celebrating this, they are actively developing AI to like generate news articles. Like they're coming for you too, bro. Like this is not, you think like you're safe because you have to do like some sort of like knowledge-based job, but and those workers at the Amazon fulfillment center are just like mindless drones who have to package stuff. But the takes are going to be algorithmically generated very soon, and you're going to be out of a job as well. So yeah,
they're already testing it out. Yeah, they're already testing it out with some of the videos that they play in those, Hill articles. Have you ever come across those? I'm just like, Is this a person or is this a robot? Anyway, but no, and I'm kidding. They're actually real people. Broadcasting there is a skill involved in it, but that's a completely different discussion for a different time. Yeah, well, I would like to think. But with that said, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we have more to get to, including shenanigans from Amazon. Who are their Twitter ambassadors and what kind of nonsense are they engaging in? You do not wanna miss this story. Come right back. Welcome back to T-Way. Well, welcome back. Welcome back to our social break. So Gabby Marita says that what country in Latin America hasn't the United States staged a coup in? I literally can't think of a single one. Yeah, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about foreign policy later in the hour. I wanted to update you guys on what we're hearing from Biden administration officials about Bolivia, where the United States certainly took part in a coup recently. But yeah, I mean, it's just looking at Biden's approach to immigration. He's not doing well in providing a Band-Aid to the problem. But again, as I've said multiple times before, in order to actually do something, you have to have this holistic approach where you consider how US foreign policy and US imperialism has played a role in these mass migrations. You can't go into countries, destabilize them and be like, oh, I don't know what's happening. Why do we have unaccompanied minors coming to the border? They're not doing it for fun. There's a reason, right? So we need to actually address the root cause. No More Trigonometry says he chose his words carefully. He, meaning Matt Gaetz, denies traveling with an underage minor, but doesn't deny any sexual relations. Yeah, I mean, multiple people have said that, and everyone's right. I mean, he hasn't explicitly denied, having relations with a 17-year-old. But really, I think the reason why he's mostly focusing on the travel part is because it's literally a federal crime to pay for the travel of a minor so you can have sex with them. So it's a child trafficking issue, big federal issue. So moving on, Jojo says, I believe the reason Gaetz was such a Trump loyalist is because of this investigation. Barr probably held it from going forward if Gaetz didn't go speak on behalf of Trump. No, the investigation started under the Trump administration. William Barr started the investigation. So I don't know if that's what Gaetz was intending to do, but if that were the case, it didn't work. Nando, real quick, thoughts on the Matt Gaetz allegations?
Well, he's our boy from Florida, my home state. Yeah, I mean, remember there was that weird thing that came out about his like adopted son Nestor and stuff. Yes. Like, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with Matt Gaetz. I mean, just take a look at him, man. I mean, that guy's a creep. that he doesn't pass the eye test. It's just like he looks like a freakazoid with all like. I mean, some of the worst. Like, I'm not against plastic surgery in general, but that's some of the worst plastic surgery you could ever get.
You think he's had plastic surgery?
I mean, look at him. Yes, he looks like Jack Nicholson's the Joker.
He does look pretty bad. Wow.
He looks awful. Wow. And yeah.
Gabby also wants to know, I'm curious how Gates and Gates's adopted son from Cuba has been living with. Hold on, let me read this again. I'm curious how Gates' adopted son from Cuba that he's been living with since he was 12 fits into this, because that relationship was also super creepy and pervy when it was revealed. Yeah, it was a very strange story. I'll give you that. We got to get back to the show. See you there. We're learning more about the shenanigans that Amazon executives have engaged in order to discourage efforts to unionize among its employees. And look, Ken Klippenstein, if there's one reporter that you need to read every time you put something out there, it's Ken Klippenstein, because he's got the scoops and he's been killing it on this Amazon story. So let's give you guys the details. Amazon deployed an army of so-called ambassadors on social media, specifically on Twitter back in 2018. And the whole point was to defend the company and clap back against progressive lawmakers like Senator Bernie Sanders. Now, they had this whole program and they even titled it Veritas. Ken Klippenstein reports in The Intercept that anticipating criticisms of worker conditions at their fulfillment centers in particular, Amazon designed Veritas to train fulfillment center workers chosen for their great sense of humor to confront critics, including policymakers, on Twitter in a blunt manner. Okay, and we do have some examples of the types of tweets they put out there. But the reason why we know about this is because someone from Amazon leaked this document to Ken Klippenstein. And the document produced as part of the pilot program in 2018 and marked Amazon.com confidential also includes examples of how its ambassadors can snarkily respond to criticisms of the company and its CEO. Several examples involve Bernie, a longtime critic of the $1 trillion firm, who has been targeted by it in recent days. It also provides examples of how to defend Bezos. And before we get to all of that, I do want to open it up to you, Nando, because as you know, as Bessemer, Alabama warehouse workers have been trying to unionize, Amazon has used all sorts of tactics to discourage them from doing so. So this really isn't that surprising.
I mean, yeah. Well, first of all, big ups to Ken Klippenstein, probably our nation's finest investigative reporter. I mean, like in terms of volume of scoops, like actual meaningful scoops, there's few reporters who generate more.
Yeah, more scoops than Baskin Robbins for sure.
Oh, hey. Oh man, more scoops than his brother, the Krasensteins. I find this story to be both hilarious and also weirdly dystopian in that is anyone swayed by any of this? Like, is anyone gonna be like read the tweets from like, Jenny at Amazon FC, who's like, you know what? I love packaging packages all day, and it's my favorite thing in the world to do. And we get great breaks. It's like the terrorist videos. Like, they're treating me very well here. And the grimness of it though is that like they're using these kind of social channels and basically, I'm assuming buying off like potential collaborators, like these employees who are willingly like shilling for management in that sense. I mean, it's crazy. There's always going to be a percentage of the population who is going to be willing to scab or just absolutely be a turncoat against like their fellow workers and try to like, I don't know, ingratiate themselves with the bosses in a way that is like, the worst kind of teacher's pet brown noser. And like, I wonder if there's, because I don't think it was in the Ken Klippenstein report whether they're being paid or not. I know they were encouraged. Who knows what like stupid benefits they were given to do that. Like, maybe they get like an extra 5 minutes to go to the bathroom and do whatever their business is if they per tweet or something. But yeah, I mean, that was what was kind of depressing about it, because I assumed they were bots, and I'm sure some of them were bots, but like the fact that they're real people is more depressing than anything else.
Right, and I would want to learn a little bit more about how this all came about, right? Like, were they approached by management over at Amazon? And if they were approached about doing this, did they really feel like they had a choice? Like, can you really like consent to being part of this? Because you could say no, but I mean, it's very clear that Amazon is punitive in so many different ways. I mean, Ken Klippenstein also reported recently about how Amazon drivers had such a heavy load of work to do on a daily basis. Like, they had to deliver a high quota of packages. And as a result, they felt like they couldn't even take a break to go to the bathroom. So many of them would defecate in bags in their cars or urinate in bottles. And so obviously there's like at least some culture of fear implemented, because you don't want to lose your job, right? Especially in this economy where you have these massive companies like Amazon that are eating up all of these other smaller companies. You really don't have much of a choice. And if you live in a small town and Amazon is your only employment option, I can see how the issue of consent can become a sticky one. But we don't know. We don't know how the recruiting process went down. And you're right, there are certainly people who are willing to place their bets with sucking up to management as opposed to unifying with their fellow workers. But I do want to give you some examples of the interactions that the document laid out, just as like, hey, here's how you can respond, that type of thing. So in one instance, the document refers to a video interview Sanders tweeted. Bernie Sanders interviewing Seth King on Prime Day. Seth describes feeling so depressed working at Amazon to take his own life, right? Like, there's a worker who's considering suicide. An ambassador role-playing then responds, Senator Sanders, this job has never made me feel bad personally. If you have a job that makes you feel bad, you could leave. Oh yeah. So that's an example of a response. Yeah.
Yeah. You could just live in destitute poverty and starve to death rather than grind your bones to sawdust in our fulfillment centers. I mean, that's a choice. That's your choice, man. I'm sorry, you chose it.
I mean, this is Chicago school talking points, like libertarian nonsense, right? Like the whole, oh no, you live in the greatest country in the world. You get to decide your fate. You get to make your own decisions. Yeah, there's one company that you can really work at this point because it's killed every other small business. Yeah. But you can make decisions. Like, please. To give you more, at another point, Sanders is described as having tweeted about Jeff Bezos' wealth. The ambassador then replies, everyone should be able to enjoy the money they've earned / saved. It's theirs. They should be able to do with it as they please. That includes Jeff Bezos. And I mean, there's a really great, in my opinion, like Marxist response to that, which is who actually built the company, right? Who's actually creating the wealth? who's generating the wealth for that company? Is it really Jeff Bezos, or is it all of those warehouse workers, all of those drivers, all of the workers who are being, even at $15 an hour, underpaid relative to the revenue that Amazon brings in on a yearly basis, including during a global pandemic? So maybe let's have a discussion about that. So anyway,
I mean,
it's frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it's, when we zoom out in the big picture, though, this Bessemer, Alabama union drive, which, we hope has to succeed, because there hasn't been a private sector union drive like this that has gotten this much attention in a long time, especially like in a working class industry. I know that the media has had several high profile kind of unionization drives, but that's in the media, therefore that's why it's covered by the media. But this is like a squarely working class union drive in the deep South, in a small town, just exactly the place where it needs to happen for it to have any meaningful ripple effect. And if it does succeed, you can imagine our politics changing pretty dramatically. If it gets defeated, it would be a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be a tough pill to swallow, but I don't want to get, first of all, I don't want to get preemptively depressed. No. Because there have already been some positive, benefits to this union drive. It's galvanized workers across the country. Now you have workers not just at Amazon fulfillment centers, but in other companies, reaching out to union leaders looking for a way to organize themselves, and that's a good sign. I think the one thing that I've noticed a change in is just like this growing awareness of class. I think that conversation was really missing nationally, and we're still like, we're not there yet, but it's growing. Like people are starting to really think of themselves, not based on other identifiers, but more importantly through class struggle. And really, when it comes to the material benefits of that, I really think it's important to have that focus and do so in an intersectional way, right? So at the end of the day, this is a class war, and we're talking about people who are building wealth for these individuals who are psychopaths, really. I mean, to the point where if you see that your workers are overwhelmed and they have to defecate in bags as a result, maybe don't punish them, maybe rethink your business model a little bit, and maybe you bring in a little tiny bit less in profits. But you're gonna be all right, dog. Like you're gonna be okay. But that's not how capitalism works. That's certainly not how Jeff Bezos and executives at Amazon work. And so they're scared, they're terrified about this effort to unionize, which brings me to the final graphic that I want to read to you guys. As Klippenstein reports, the document instructs employees not to respond to contacts about the right to unionize, one of the only 3 cases in which they're told not to respond. An example to ignore is provided. Amazon let your FC employees unionize if you have nothing to hide. So if someone says that to one of these or tweets that, the ambassadors are told just ignore it, do not respond to it, don't draw any attention to that. So, and I lied. There is one more graphic because you tweeted it. It was hilarious. So there are bots as well. And here's an example. Tim Sullivan tweeted this out. Someone with the handle OK4AT, Bert at OK4. That's an image of a guy, a personality from this YouTube channel called Dude Perfect. So they just really didn't try with this one at all, as Tim Sullivan mentions.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. You love to see it. You love to see it. God, I hope they win.
So, I know, me too. Well, we're gonna take a break, but when we come back, we'll update you on how dire the situation has become for tens of millions of Americans who need healthcare. And Bernie Sanders does have a proposal when it comes to expanding Medicare. We'll give you the details on that and more when we come back. What's up, everyone? Welcome to our social break. Ryan Atkins wanted to talk a little bit about the Uber profits, and he says Nando Uber profits off data collection from the app and loses billions on ride sharing, working as intended. So, yeah,
but there are no profits. I mean, unless I'm misunderstanding something, there's no.
Yeah,
profits.
there really
there's
aren't.
massive losses.
Yeah,
you know, like
and
more
by the
money
way,
goes. More money goes out than goes in. You know, like I'm not an MBA, but I think that's backwards. You know.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, I mean, data collection, we're effectively providing free labor to social media platforms and the gig economy by just being part of it, right? People don't think of themselves as unpaid workers, but our activity on social media then gets sold to third parties. And they're making profit off of us and we're not getting paid anything for it. So something to keep in mind. Tobias Dews from our Twitch section, 4 months tier 1 and gifted 5 subs. Longtime viewer, I like this. Anna, don't get banned again. I got banned from the TYT Twitch chat room because people thought I was an imposter.
What?
Also, I was, I know.
What were you doing on the Twitch? Was it getting wild?
No, I was having fun. The Twitch community's fun. They really are. Like, it's, I don't know. I was watching.
Did you say like a racial slur or something?
No, no, of course not. But I did. Someone asked me based on the conversation you and I had in the post game. No, I did not do that. But anyway, we'll talk about it in the post game. But I got to move on. John Idarola gifted a sub, and the comment here is again, what a dweeb. I'm guessing that Brett wrote that in. Tempo Dan gifted 10 subs. The One Winged Dragon gifted a sub. T Bartimus gifted a sub. Per Z 11 months tier 3. Buttered Pop-Tart Dragon says Matt Gaetz is a tool, and I'm so happy that I figured out how to sub using my Bezos bucks. Love you, Salty Dragon and Beef Dragon? Is Nando Beef Dragon? Or is that John? Nando.
I guess you're Beef Dragon. John is a little more beefy than me. He's got the bigger guns, so.
Yeah, so some people call John Beef. Oh my God, you guys, come on. They call him Beef Daddy. Because he hates it. Okay, good. I'm glad he hates it. Thank God. Family of Critters, 6 months prime. Existential Crisis, 4 months tier 1. Andrew G, 5 months tier 1. WD Ryan, 2 months prime with the comment, 2 months of sending Bezos money to TYT. Thank you. Total Anarchy, 2 months tier 1 with I'm not surprised by this. The GOP eat their own and have no sense of the word loyalty. I actually disagree with you. I feel like that takes place a lot more on the left, and usually conservatives find ways to stay together regardless of what the controversy is. But it just seems like people don't like Matt Gaetz, even among conservatives. Also, Drink That OJ gave 420 bits, and so did Irie Man. So thank you so much for supporting us, guys. Make sure you check out our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TYT. Now, let's get back to the show. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and Nando Vila with you. I wanted to plug Woke Bros, which Nando hosts with Waz every week. So check out that podcast on wherever you get your podcast. It's a really, really great weekly show, super laid back format, which I really appreciate. And then we also host a show together every Saturday morning for Jacobin. Go to youtube.com/JacobinMag and please subscribe. Check out that Saturday show. We put a lot of work behind it. All right, so Nando, why don't we talk a little foreign policy? You ready?
Let's do it. Yes.
Let's do it. Biden is unfortunately continuing his long established pattern of terrible foreign policy related rhetoric and actions. This time it has to do with Bolivia, which had just overcome a US led coup. And that coup, of course, overthrew Evo Morales, who had won the election. There was no question he won the election. Even reporters who seem to be complicit in this coup admitted that he won. It's just that he didn't win by a large enough margin, which makes absolutely no sense. But with that said, Biden officials seem to be pretty salty about the coup leader's arrest. So when Evo Morales was essentially exiled, the person who ended up taking charge was not second in line in the election. It was a woman named Janine Áñez, who then not only proceeded to serve as the leader of this coup, she also proceeded to carry out brutal acts against indigenous Bolivians and also any of the supporters of Evo Morales. As many as 8 people were killed as a result. So what's interesting is that the Biden administration doesn't agree with the fact that she's been arrested. I would argue I wouldn't agree with her decision to remain in the country as if she did nothing wrong. Like what? So before I get to more details, Nando, I know you've been covering this. I wanted to get some of your thoughts.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the most remarkable chutzpah you could ever imagine, right? They're expressing grave concerns over the human rights of Janine Áñez just because she's being held in a totally kind of humane prison. I mean, certainly compared to the prisons in the United States. While they investigate whether this was a crimes that are worth convicting for a large length of time. I mean, in the United States, people get thrown in jail all the time before they see trial, and sometimes even for over a year, sometimes 2 years, sometimes as long as 3 years. They're in jail before they get a trial. But of course, we have to moralize about the human rights, supposed human rights violations in a country in which we, if not actively participated, certainly gave political cover to a right-wing military coup, which led to untold death and destruction. I mean, really, we won't really know how many people died as a result of the sort of counter protests and protests that happened in the wake of the coup, the repressions from the state, the unleashing of police officers and the armed forces on innocent protesters and things like that. So. Yeah, I mean, it is just utterly shameful. It's outrageous. It's really like the meddling of the United States inside the judicial affairs of a legitimately democratically elected government. I mean, no one. The elections in Bolivia are not disputed by anyone at this point. This is not even the most. Yeah.
Including the reporters who had seemed to back up the coup in their reporting previously, right? Just regurgitating talking points from the Organization of American States, which is the organization that alleged that there was like voter fraud taking place. The Washington Post actually reported that the OAS was wrong, right?
Yeah.
And then they proceeded to publish an op-ed, the editorial board did, with this: the Biden administration should lead a regional effort to preserve democracy or democratic stability in this long-suffering country, lest crisis turn into catastrophe. What?
Democratic stability is such a tell. I mean, it's just where was that outrage when they led the coup in the first place? I mean, this is just. I mean, there was an election after the right-wing coup happened, and in which Luis Arce won, and there is not a single ounce of doubt on that election result. I mean, obviously, like the election result that Evo Morales won in beforehand, also there should be no doubt, but there was stuff in the press. So you can imagine, like, even if we're granting them that, which we should not, in this new round, there are no doubts. So this is just pure and unadulterated meddling inside the affairs of a country that has democratically elected its government and has every right in the world to decide how and when and in what way to prosecute the criminals that aided and abetted a right-wing military coup. Like there's no place for the United States, given the judicial system we have in this country, where we put more people in jail than anyone else, where we torture people by putting them in solitary confinement, torture according to the Geneva Conventions, where we have trials without prisoners without trials in Guantanamo forever and with no hope of a trial or anything like that. For us to then be moralizing about the judicial processes of a democratically elected government is absolute lunacy. There should be no one should take this seriously, not even a little bit. It's none of these paeans to human rights have any sort of standing in any way. So it's absolutely insane that the Biden administration is pursuing this line through Secretary of State Tony Blinken, who has adopted a pose towards Latin America that is indistinguishable, obviously, from Trump's, indistinguishable really from any American president in the last several decades, in which we have the right to pick and choose the leaders of countries in Latin America, not the Latin American people themselves. We choose, and if we don't like it, we do whatever it takes to put the guy we do like.
Well, Anthony Blinken did release a statement about this as well. And so US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said in a statement that there are questions about the legality of the arrests and urged Bolivia to release the detainees pending an independent and transparent inquiry into human rights and due process concerns, which again, like when you're so right, when you take a step back and you look at the context of human rights abuses and the illegality of police actions, for instance. I mean, we're currently experiencing the Derek Chauvin trial in real time, and there's no comment about that. But there's a comment about the authorities in Bolivia deciding, I think correctly, to detain the leader of a right-wing coup in their country, and someone who was incredibly brutal to supporters of Evo Morales and protesters in the wake of the coup, as you mentioned. And luckily, they were able to come together and overcome that coup. And luckily, they did have a democratic election. But I do want to note that Jeanine Áñez did everything in her power to prevent that election from happening. She kept delaying the election. And there's no comment from Anthony Blinken about that. And I would venture to say, this is just my speculation, that this is exactly why you don't nominate think tank people like Anthony Blinken. He created a think tank after the Obama administration, which was heavily funded by defense contractors. That's why you don't want that type of corruption in the White House. And for anyone who was like, come on, why are you complaining about this? Trump's finally out of office. No, well, Trump might be out of office, but as Noam Chomsky shared recently, there's really no difference between Trump's foreign policy and Biden's foreign policy so far. And that's an issue. That's a huge issue that we need to be honest about.
Yeah, I mean, liberals always get mad at the left when they say like, oh, you guys say that the two parties are the same. There are some differences between the party, but between the two parties. But in the realm of foreign policy, even a grotesque figure like Trump is just par for the course of US longstanding US policy. One of which, for example, is the absolute impunity which the United States ascribes to itself when it comes to international law. The United States, for example, does not recognize the authority of the International Criminal Court over its own citizens. But it does recognize that authority on the citizens of other people. The United States does not recognize the authority of the Geneva Conventions over its own actions, but it does really, love to say like, oh, this is a human rights violation to other countries it doesn't like. So the absolute the United States acting with impunity in foreign affairs is a 100% bipartisan consensus. There is no challenging that within the two-party structure. Zero, not one person who is like within the power structures of either party would ever challenge those totems of consensus of the US foreign policy. The consensus of empire is Democrat, it's Republican, and everything in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And just quickly going back to the editorial board over at the Washington Post, they mentioned the importance of preserving democratic stability. I want them to take a good hard look at what the result of the American version of democratic stability looks like at the border, really. Because the meddling that the United States is engaged in, the US-backed coups that the United States has implemented in many Latin American countries has led to that crisis at the border. And I know some people have issues with referring to it as a crisis, but it is a crisis. It's a crisis when you have parents who are so desperate to get their children to safety that they will literally allow for them to travel in this treacherous journey to the United States because that's literally the only option they think they have. Okay, and that's not because, well, maybe these governments just don't know what they're doing. No, the United States has gone in. The United States has overthrown democratically elected leaders. I mean, there's a long history of that. And when we're talking about Guatemala, again, US-led coup in the 1950s, all of this stuff has consequences, guys. And that's why it's important that anytime there are discussions about solutions to immigration, just simply saying like, maybe we need to build more facilities. No, that's not the solution. Maybe we need to do that. Maybe we need to put monitoring anklets on them. Stop thinking about Band-Aids, okay? Take a step back and think about how our actions in other countries have led to what we're experiencing right now. We're just not honest about it. And I think that's really the heart of this immigration problem. And also one other thing, let's keep it real. Republicans don't really do anything about immigration. Democrats don't really do anything about immigration because they're addicted to the cheap labor. They might pretend otherwise, but I'm not buying it. They're bought off by their corporate donors. That's all they care about. And their corporate donors love the cheap labor. Post game is next, see you there.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks.
Ooh.
Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like, tyt.com/join, and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitzing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny. Bye. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing. I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, AKA Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
And this is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. Referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
We're gonna do a little thing we like to call Weekly World News. Weekly World News. I cull stories from around the globe, stories that aren't covered on the main show or aren't covered enough, and I turn it into a 5-question quiz for Dave and Steve. All right, do we have our answers? A from Dave and C from Steve. And the correct answer is B, an oil tanker that sank off the coast of China. Okay, we have one answer of B and one answer of C. What is the correct answer? It is, of course, A, an airplane wing walking stunt gone wrong. Okay, we have an answer of A from Dave and C from Steve. The correct answer is B. We have an answer of B and C. What is the correct answer in true Weekly World News tradition? It's A.
Come on.
Taking the bear out for ice cream.
That can't possibly be true. We're terrible today. Just terrible.
When news is breaking and when you need Brett Ehrlich, it's time. When news breaks, when news is breaking and you like, when news is breaking and you need Brett Ehrlich, it's time for Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich. This is Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's going to be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader. All right, welcome to the post-game show. Anna and Nando with you. And right before we started the post-game, our wonderful producer, Shwarya, brought up something that we were discussing. I have a habit of, if I'm in a nice neighborhood, either on a jog or a walk, really taking in the sights. If you have a nice house and you have decided that you're not gonna close the curtains, but you have a nice big, I think they're called picture windows or whatever, I'm gonna look inside your house. Like, I'm not gonna walk up to your house and like be a weirdo peeping Tom, but as I'm walking by, am I going to look inside your house and see what that dining room looks like? Yes, of course, everyone is. I think every normal person will. Like, why wouldn't you want people to look, you little perverts? Like, you want people to look when you don't close your curtains. That's what I think.
Wow, not closing your curtains means you're a pervert. I get it.
And it's not to like,
look at this pervert.
But that's different. That's different. And it's like, it's still daytime. I'm talking about like, it's early evening, they have the lights on in that dining room or living room or wherever that window is. It's a giant, like you've seen those windows, right? Like those huge, and if it's a nice house, aren't you curious what it looks like inside? Like, I don't care about the people at all. Like, I'm not looking for nudity. I'm not looking for anyone hot. I don't care. I just want to see what it looks like inside that house.
I'm coming to your house. But if there was nudity,
I'm coming to your house.
I'm
coming to your house.
If there was nudity, would you be like,
I'm coming to your house.
More or less?
If it was what?
If there was nudity, would you be more intrigued or less intrigued?
I mean, I'd probably be less intrigued just because that's when it does become creepy. So I don't
I remember when I was in high school. The friend of mine went on a date with this girl, whatever, and he picked her up at her house in the suburbs, type of thing. And they were coming home like late, and they didn't want to. They didn't want to like go in through the front door or whatever, and I think they were kind of like sneaking around to get like to their to her bedroom or something, to maybe, I don't know, And as they're walking kind of around the house, they can like see through the parents' like bedroom, and they had like a big screen TV on in front of their bed, the parents, and they just see the mom sitting on the bed, casually reading like a People magazine or something, while the dad is watching like hardcore porn, jacking off, standing up.
I'm coming for you.
And the mom's just like casually flipping through like Us Weekly, like it's the most normal thing in the world.
But I think that that's probably what happens. Like that ends up happening. Like, what are you gonna do? You live together, you're married, you live together, and sometimes your partner just needs a little self-love. What are you gonna do? You're gonna judge them? No, you can either judge them and have a crappy marriage, or you can read People magazine and take a load off, right? So good for them. I just would not want to come across that if, people I know.
If you were in high school and you were bringing home a guy and sneaking around. I mean,
yeah, 100%. So bad. But no, for me, it's more like, I'm the weirdo who likes to go to open houses for homes that I would never be able to afford, right? Because
you should pretend you're like some Middle Eastern like billionaire, put on an accent and be like, "Oh, very interesting. This is, well, do you think in the oil trust fund we have enough for this house?" And then that would be a funny little bit I could see for you.
I should try going to open houses, not looking like I just woke up, because you guys don't get it. Like when I'm not on camera, I hate wearing makeup. I don't dress up. I'm super casual. And so usually when I go to these open houses, I get that look from the realtors like, yeah, whatever. And they just like look away.
How expensive are we talking about?
Like
$10 million homes? Like, do those homes even have open houses?
I don't even try with $10 million house. I'm like afraid. I feel like I'd get shot if I walked into a $10 million house.
Oh God, look, it's one of them. Yeah.
I'm talking about houses that like used to be obtainable for workers in this country, but now are priced at like $1.5 million. And I'm just like, all right, well, I've been priced out of the market. They're not like huge mansions, but they're modest homes. Like they have, maybe 2,500 square feet, like that kind of thing. But it doesn't matter. Like the size doesn't matter to me. The stuff that gets me super excited.
Someone clipped that an experience saying size doesn't matter to me. Come on, internet.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. Okay, it's about how it's really about how stable and strong the construction is, right? So like in this case, I'm looking for that rock hard marble. Like I love marble. And so that's what I'm looking for.
Veiny marble, yeah.
Oh yeah, the thicker the veins, the better. Calcutta marble is my personal favorite. But yeah, like I love the design. And oftentimes like the houses, that are $1 million and above tend to have nicer interior design. So that's what I look for. But you don't really need like a giant house. Like it's such a waste of space. And it requires a lot more maintenance and cleaning and costs and blah, 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 blah. Like I don't want a sprawling mansion. I just want like my dream is to have like a 1,500 square foot home, okay, with a backyard. Nando, backyard with trees, like fruit trees, flowers. You got some, you got some peonies growing in. Maybe you got some, I don't know. I think they're called David Austin roses. They're like super lush and beautiful. Like I dream of that.
Bougainvilleas.
Yes, you Floridian. Yes, some bougainvilleas. Yes. Every time I go to Florida, Christian's family like shows it off, and I'm like, we got this in California too. It's okay. Anyway, all right. Well, okay, let's do this quick. Well, it's not quick, but I do want to talk about this healthcare story. And then I had one other thing I wanted to mention. Let's put the healthcare story aside. Let's talk about the other thing real quick. Okay. And if we have time, we'll either do the healthcare story today during the post game or during the main show tomorrow. So years ago, we had covered this story about an app that was gonna launch, right? And this app was called Citizen. And I remember having like negative thoughts about it because the whole point of the app is to do crowd generated crime reporting in various neighborhoods. And so I had forgotten that we did that story because it was like several years ago. And then I don't know how I came across the app, but I did come across it and I was like, this is interesting. I'd like to know about the crime in my area. I'm addicted to it. But that doesn't mean I like it. It's like an unhealthy addiction and it sows fear and paranoia. I certainly did not realize like how much violent crime takes place near where I live. And so needless to say, I walk around with pepper spray now because I'm like scared that someone's gonna like viciously attack me as I'm like out on a walk. But like nothing's happened. I'm sure that this is actually something that's been going on for a long time. There has been an uptick in crime throughout the country as a result of the pandemic. But there's the other part of it, which is some of the posts are really funny, right? Like some of them are just like, that's why I'm partly addicted to it because I'm like, wow, what are people thinking? Like, what are they up to? And so I came across this yesterday. I have some screenshots. Woman robbed Ralph's while armed with wine bottle.
Women be drinking their wines, you know? Women be liking their rosé while they're doing their robberies.
Rosale. I don't know how you rob a Ralph's, which is a supermarket in California, with a wine bottle, but good for her. I mean, I don't know what she robbed the Ralph's of, but if she's able to do that with a wine bottle, I feel like that takes some skill. More wine, and if it was for more wine, just let her have the wine. It's gonna be okay.
Let her have it.
All right. Yeah.
Do not get between a woman and her wine. I know that from my girlfriend. She gets, you know.
People love wine. People love wine. That's what I hear, folks. Everyone's saying it. Everyone's saying
folks, the wine is very good, very good. They invented it with the grapes, and everybody knows that. Then the grape lady, she fell when she tried to do the stomping, and that was a terrible tragedy. But I hope she's okay. I miss him. I miss him in a way.
I mean,
Did you see the story of him showing up at a Mar-a-Lago wedding and just like taking the mic and like talking about like, you know, some random person who he thinks like stole his election or whatever? It's just, that's perfect. It's perfect. It's just, that was a perfect story. I wish I was there. I wish I could have seen that whole thing. It would have made me very happy.
If he had no popularity with huge swaths of Republican voters, then I would have wanted him to remain in the public, mostly because of how, I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional, but like, yeah, the way he communicates is funny.
It's weird. He has a weird way with words that is just, no one speaks like him and no one can, you know? Like it's so weird.
So
like
absurd.
How does he speak like that? I don't get it.
I don't know. But it was like, you know, after Bush was out of office, I loved going back and watching Bush clips because they're hilarious. Like, but Bush wasn't funny intentionally. He was just really, really dumb, and he did tend to say incredibly stupid things publicly with this unearned confidence. And so, like, one of my favorite conversations with my brother is about that. Like, I'll bring up something that Bush said, and my brother will be like, that's not true. It's just not true. I'm like, no, he said it. He said that Mandela was dead when he wasn't dead. He's like, no, it's not true. I played it for him. My brother's obsessed with Bush clips now. The fool me once, can't get fooled again. Like, he loves that. He says it all the time. Like, it's just so good. It's so good. So one of the other things I came across yesterday on the app was 5-year-old child crashed car. This 5-year-old child was driving the vehicle, crashed into a bridge. Luckily, no one was hurt, but there was another minor in the passenger seat.
Do you remember that viral video a few years ago of like the little kid who crashed his like grandmother's car, and like the local news reporter like interviewed the kid, and the kid was like, Yeah, I just want to do hood rat shit with my friends. He's like 5. I'll send it to you. Oh, you do remember that?
So good.
Yeah.
But send it to me anyway. I want to watch it again.
I just want to do hood rat shit with my friend. Let him do
me
the
and my
hood rat
friends
shit.
say that before we go out on a regular, like whenever we would go out on a regular basis, we'd be like, yeah, let's get together. Let's do some hood rat shit. And it was a reference to that. It was, that was pretty funny. Also, an apple was thrown at a person. And that's the other thing. Like, why is this, if this is an app about crime, why does anyone need to know that an apple was thrown at a person? But that happened as well. And Nando, the most common thing that gets posted on Citizen is this, and I'm not kidding, I'm being serious. Report of a dumpster fire. There are dumpster fires all throughout
Have you
California.
ever looked at my mentions?
I haven't, but I can speak from personal experience that mentions are usually the digital dumpster fire that we all enjoy on a regular basis, right? So bad.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Citizen,
I don't know.
So I got to get on it. I'm sure there's some funny ones here in Venice. Some funny crimes happening. Yeah.
But there's also like pretty, I don't know. There's like some pretty scary stuff as well. Like shootings are up a lot in Los Angeles. I've noticed that.
All over the country.
Yep.
I mean, it's not a really surprise. There's been this kind of social collapse that we're living through. So yeah, crime's gonna go up.
Yeah, and I should probably do a deep dive on this because just briefly talking about it might give people the wrong idea. But I'm kind of rethinking a little bit of the things that I thought I was supportive of in regard to prosecuting people and crime and all that. Because right now in Los Angeles, as part of that like no cash bail thing, which I think has all the best intentions, which is why I was supportive of it. Effectively, what's happening is people will engage in literally violent crimes, and then they just get processed and released like right away. And that has encouraged more people to do that because they know they'll be let out immediately. And I don't know what the answer is because cash bail.
No, the answer. I mean, the answer is very simple though. That's the thing. Is like. The answer is to not have a social collapse. Like if you have a healthy functioning society, what?
Yeah, I mean, it is.
It's the same thing with the immigration thing though that you were talking about earlier. It's the same, like we look at the problem and we think the solution comes from within the universe of the problem, but it's the problem is actually a different universe. It's the crime and the immigration or whatever is a function of a society that isn't working. And all we have to do is like fix the society, and then we'll do it. Like that's the American punitive carceral state is as much a product of criminal justice policies of the like which Joe Biden has written throughout his entire career, but more broadly speaking, it's the hollowing out of state functions, right? It's the neoliberalism for lack of a better term. It's things that the state used to take care of for people like mental health and the thing and decent jobs and lack of hunger, all that shit, which has been hollowed out by neoliberalism, is what's going to lead to a more violent society, a more anxious society that engages in crime. And so that's the solution. It's not complicated. It's just not easy,
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. You're right. It's not complicated, but I don't think it's easy because it requires resources. Yeah, go ahead.
Totally, it requires state investment and it requires higher taxes on the rich and it requires a much broader welfare state and labor unions and things like that. But like here in Venice, I mean, the amount of like literally insane people that just wander the streets like at any given moment is truly shocking. And it's just like, it's not. Like this is a product of a society that doesn't work, like someone who is having an obvious psychotic breakdown, like leaving them in the street is a danger to everyone, to themselves first and foremost, but to everyone around them. Like they cannot be allowed to just wander the streets. That is true. But we also need like humane kind of services for these people, and other countries do it. Like you don't walk around any sort of metropolis in Europe and see dozens of just insane people on the same street. Like just completely, yabbering about like absolute lunacy stuff. And it's just because it is antisocial. And so what they do is they process them, they put them in centers, they treat them for the mental illness. If they can be fixed, if it can be cured, then they are, but like if not, then they become wards of the state in a state that is much more humane and able to take care of them. Like here, we just like either throw you in these rotting prisons, which like would horrify even like Joseph Stalin, or you're just out on the street to fend for yourself. Those are the two options, and it's like the solution is just sitting right next to it. It's just not easy.
You just said the most reasonable things that I've heard so far about the like the homeless crisis in California, really, but there's a lot of it concentrated in Los Angeles. Like the thing that's been, and I haven't been open about it because I just feel like people aren't ready for a frank discussion about it. Like people want to immediately cast you off as like this cruel, awful person. If you just admit, and I think that this should be an admission, that mentally ill homeless people who have gone untreated, undiagnosed, who have been completely neglected by society cannot make decisions for themselves sometimes, right? So there are like homeless activists in Los Angeles who are like, no, the humane thing to do is to leave them on the streets where they want to be. They want to be on the streets. They do not want to go into this free housing, okay? They have decided that they want to live here, and the humane thing to do is allow them with their untreated mental illnesses, with giant piles of unsanitary, literal trash, to just like die on the streets. That's the humane thing to do. And it makes me fucking crazy, right? Because look, are all of them like that? No, they're not all like that. I'm talking about the activists. They're activists who understand the severity of the problem and don't live in this weird utopian idealistic nonsense world, right? But the ones who get quoted in some of these lengthy pieces about the issue, I don't know how many of them there are. I don't know if the journalists are picking their quotes just to make it seem like this is the entirety of the activism taking place.
Of course.
Probably that's the case. But like if you're an activist and your talking point is, well, the thing is, these people do not want to live in individual apartments that the city is providing because they would have to share a bathroom. Like, comments like that, quotes like that, fuck off. How about that? Because letting them just die on the streets, that's not the humane answer. It's just not.
Yeah.
Like, so again, I don't know how many of those people exist in the activist community, but those people are not helping with any real solutions, okay? Like I just, and romanticizing homelessness. Like I'm seeing a lot of that. Romanticizing the situation at the Echo Park Lake. I'm sorry, there were like dead bodies found there, including an 18-year-old Black Lives Matter activist who was found dead in a tent, and she had been there for several days. Like, don't romanticize the situation. Be real about what's happening on the ground and provide services. You're right, and on one hand, you have the lawmakers who are unwilling to provide the services. On the other hand, you have these idiots who are romanticizing the situation and acting as if, it's such a wonderful community at this lake where drug dealing and crime is happening and people are randomly getting assaulted. No, that's not a good situation. So that's how I feel about it. I've been quiet about the Echo Park Lake situation because I just feel like both actors are just not being reasonable here.
Well, I mean, it's mostly because the problem has gotten so bad that the immediate solutions are not super savory because these things take decades of state building and things like that. And we had gotten to a pretty good place in the United States, and we were getting better, and then we just kind of stopped and then went in the opposite direction. And yeah, I mean, obviously, like I sympathize with understanding that the LAPD the LAPD, not like nobody's idea of like a humane organization, like handling this like humanitarian crisis, which is what it is. I mean, these people are like internal refugees in like no different from Syrian refugees in like huddled up in camps outside of in Greece and shit, and having them like clear them out and like it's just that's not like a great way to handle it. On the other hand, I understand like not wanting a homeless encampment on Echo Park or anywhere else really, that it's just not. It's not a social way of living. It's not. It promotes like antisocial behavior in so many ways.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is like,
and it creates more of a divide among ordinary people too, right? Like, because, and by the way, let me add, in regard to the police, let me just add. That the police, I think, with the go ahead from the city, just stopped. Collecting trash, ensuring that at least like there's some order, right? Like, and so they did that intentionally so the situation would get so bad, and just so bad that like the people living in these neighborhoods would get angry and fed up with it. So it's like there's this intentional effort to divide people as well, and to basically condition people to think of the homeless not as victims of a broken system, but as like pests, And so like the way that it's been handled or ignored, neglected has been such a problem. And yeah, the only real
here in Venice, it's bad. Here in Venice, it's really bad. I mean, it's been bad for several. I mean, I've lived here for 5 years, and it's just like it was bad the day I moved in here, and it's like the day I moved to Venice. Actually, this is a great story. The day I moved to Venice, when I first moved to Venice, I was going to share a house with a friend of mine from Miami. We're both moving to LA at the same time. I was going to live in the guest house in the back, and he was going to live with his stepdaughter in the main house. Great, but I showed up first. He was gonna come like the following month, whatever. I show up and I like get the keys from the person that we're renting the house from, and I open the guest house, and there's a homeless person like sleeping in there, And I was like, oh shit! Like this is at night, and I got pretty scared, and I was like, And he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I live here." I'm like, I didn't really live. I didn't have anything on me. I didn't have like furniture or anything. Like, and I was like, "I live here." He's like, "No, you don't." And I was like, "Yeah, I just got like I'm moving in right now."
Yeah. And, no, it's awful. Like, and it puts everyone in such a terrible situation.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Like, and it ended up like nothing happened, and the guy just left, and there was no, it was very civil, and it wasn't like, I didn't have to like call the cops or anything like that. Like I was just kind of like, hey man, I just moved in tonight, and he's like, oh, because I thought this other person lived here, and I guess he was like using it as like a hookup room for a while, and he was just waiting for his date, which was kind of I thought was kind of funny, but I mean that was when I moved to Venice. That was the first day of living in Venice. I remember it was the day that Brexit happened, which is just like I'll never forget that the Brexit vote went down, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse here. And like it's horrible because like I see on the streets, I just see like these homeless people who like, I mean, can you think of like someone more powerless? And it's like these cops like show up and then they just kind of, pretty aggressively like shuffle them from one street corner to another, and like the root of the problem is never ever solved. Like I mean, the other day I saw this poor woman, outside of a Whole Foods, which I live right near a Whole Foods. I was just walking my dog, and I see her like 3 cop cars arresting her after pretty obviously stealing food from the Whole Foods, and like it just breaks your heart. It's like we're living through like a social collapse, and decent societies do not have these problems. They don't. This is not like an intractable problem that has no solution. Decent societies have figured it out. There are no homeless people in Tokyo, the largest city in the world. Like in Spain where I come, in Spain, where I come from, the problem is very racialized, and there are homeless people and encampments of like mostly like Roma people and things like that. But in general, like the problem is kind of solved over there. Like they don't really have the same level of homelessness here as we see here. And it's possible. We're a rich country. We can figure it out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't want anyone to think like I'm not trying to demonize homeless people. I want them to get the services they need. This is a deeper societal, as Nando mentioned, collapse. And instead of talking about the actual solutions, we get caught up in, the activists might not think of it this way, but I do, neoliberal framing about whether or not they should be able to keep their trash. Like that's where the debates are right now. And I'm sorry, that's not a discussion about being humane. That's just a discussion about, I guess in their view, some sort of band-aid on this problem, but it's not the humane way of dealing with it, especially when we're seeing, I mean, a huge portion of homeless people in California do have mental health issues. It's obvious I've been attacked a few times, but like I'm not like physically attacked, right? But they're mentally ill. Like, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna get angry that I was attacked. I'm angry that they're not being offered the services that they need. And it's creating a dangerous situation for them and also for everyone else who unfortunately cross paths with them as they're having an episode.
Did you watch the Joker movie?
I started watching it and too many, like my empathy goes like through the roof. Like watching people get bullied and like I just don't enjoy it. So I had to stop. I stopped like maybe 20 minutes in.
I mean, the Joker movie, which I thought was like a B, I thought it was like okay. But the Joker movie actually politically, I thought had like pretty perfect politics. Like they really did understand the issues like very, very well. And there's like a very kind of telling story about the neoliberalization of the American state, in which like it wasn't perfect, but at least a lot more of the functions that the state needs to be doing were being done in the 60s and 70s. They started being hollowed out in the 70s, and there's the scene where the Joker, where Joaquin Phoenix, before he becomes the Joker, like loses his like basically mental health counselor that was provided for free by the state. And it wasn't great. Like I'm sure, like she seemed like just an okay civil servant. It wasn't like she was like this heroic figure. She was just kind of a city worker who was in charge of this guy's case, and it's not like he was cured or anything, but she kind of held it together and blah blah blah. And then as soon as like she gets fired or he gets like knocked off the program because of budgetary cuts that happened in New York City in the 1970s, and he goes insane and starts murdering people. Like I mean, that's just like it's a very clear example of what neoliberalism does to a society, which is like if you strip away state functions that support people when they're in need, welfare, state welfare. I mean, like we don't talk about like Bill Clinton's welfare reform as a huge driver of homelessness, like doubled extreme poverty in this country. Like things like that, like those state functions hold the society together. And if you strip them away, the society falls apart. I mean, that's just it. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it in real time. In one of the largest economies in the world. I'm talking about the state of California. That's what we're seeing. So much wealth generated in this country, in the state, and yes, in this country as well. And you see that extreme inequality in real time, and it's just absolutely, it's devastating. Anyway, we're way out of time, but that was a fun post game, a really good conversation. Everyone, please check out Happy Half Hour, which airs on our Twitch channel right after the post game. And of course, Brett Ehrlich hosts that. And then this weekend, check out Weekends with Anna and Nando over at the Jacobin channel, youtube.com/JacobinMag. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Nando. And we'll see you guys soon.